Happy holidays, everyone. What's going on? Welcome to a really fun, different type of weekend podcast we're going to do today. This is going to be a live stream, a sponsored live stream, courtesy of a great listener. We're going to sit here and discuss all of my personal favorite tag teams from just limiting it to WWE and WCW. This was a really fun request, actually a video that I'm surprised I've never done before. I've talked a lot about tag teams throughout the years. I'm sure you guys know what the number one is going to be here, but you might not. You might be surprised with some of my picks for the other 9 teams. And this was a really fun list to kind of come up with and think of to do and make notes for, because I really had to. I changed my mind about 100 times. You know, I bumped a team or two off the list, added a team or two. The more I thought about it, and the more I thought about how some of these teams affected my memory and stuff. So I put a decent amount of thought into this and which teams were truly my favorite of all time. And I had to sometimes, you know, kind of be a little bit honest with myself. So I tried to do my best here. I just want you guys to keep in mind, this is not my top 10 best tag teams. These are not who I'm saying are the 10 best. These are the 10 favorites of mine. So if you have a problem with it, it's not really your place to complain, because it's not your favorite, it's mine. See how it works? So if you don't agree with it, make your own fucking list. But anyway, I hope you guys are having a great afternoon, and I hope you had a great Christmas. If you celebrate Christmas, that was yesterday. And I hope everybody had a wonderful holiday. I had a great time spending time with my family and my posse and crew and all that, and it was great, as most years are here in San Diego Christmases. So wherever you were in the world or the country or whatever sort of hassles you had to deal with this year, and opposed to years past because of the COVID pandemic and stuff like that, I hope it was as good as it could possibly be for you, and I hope you guys had a great one and are happy, healthy, and safe. Let me make sure I can hear myself. All right, we look good there. Yeah, so that's pretty much what this is going to be. Obviously, no Winged Eagle podcast today. I didn't really think it was going to be necessary because, number one, the holiday was going to keep me really busy, and it was going to be hard for me to make notes for all the results all week, and I didn't want to have to bother myself, with that and having to stress out to get it all ready by today. Plus, I wasn't expecting a whole lot out of the Wednesday night shows, and that turned out to be the case. Both shows were okay, but nothing, to come up here and talk for an hour about, and we all know what kind of crap we got last Monday on Raw. The one shining star of the week, though, was last night's SmackDown. I don't know if you guys caught that, but it's probably, in my opinion, one of the best Christmas shows I've ever seen, in modern times, because the Kevin Owens and Roman Reigns cage match was fantastic, and it really looks like they're going to stretch that angle out until possibly the Royal Rumble to do another match again. Maybe even add Daniel Bryan to the mix. So you're getting no complaints out of me, because I think Kevin Owens and Roman have amazing chemistry. That was fantastic last night. And of course, Big E defeated Sami Zayn in a lumberjack match to win the Intercontinental title. So looks like he's finally got some singles gold. Some people are pissed because they wanted to win the Royal Rumble. It might not be in the cards for him to win the Royal Rumble. As much as I want him to, him and Bianca Belair, if they don't have plans for him to win the Royal Rumble, then I'd rather just keep him out of it. You know what I mean? And that goes for anybody. Oh, Keith Lee, he needs to be in the Rumble. Whoever... when they pick and choose somebody to win it, I don't want all these other guys in it. They can't all win it. So I don't want to see Big E get tossed over. I don't want to see Keith Lee get tossed over. So if they're not going to win it, keep them out of it. So we'll see where Big E's run goes. Sami Zayn's still pissed. Looks like he'll be chasing the title for a little while, but at least congrats to Big E. That's a 7-year gap in between IC title runs, and maybe it's the beginning of something more. Hopefully it will be. But either way, SmackDown was a decent show last night, and they pulled in a pretty good rating today. So that's all pretty awesome, and it was a good way to finish out the week. But again, not enough to really fill a whole podcast, and usually also during holiday weeks, news is light, so there's not a whole lot going on other than the passing of Danny Hodge today. I wasn't even aware Danny Hodge was still alive, so that kind of surprised me, but he passed away, I guess, maybe yesterday. List his date of death as Christmas Day. So that's a shame. For those listening in Canada, happy Boxing Day to you, and I hope you had an excellent holiday season as well. But I'm going to knock out these super chats in a minute, let you know what we're going to talk about here. Like I said, it's going to be my top 10 favorite tag teams of all time. We're going to limit the pool here from just WWE and WCW, because that's what most people are familiar with. And that really was able to help me narrow it down just a little bit more. And I really was really happy that we included that. This live stream is sponsored by Mike Sim. He's a gentleman from New York who's about my age. So he and I kind of similar memories with wrestling, especially from a nostalgic point of view, and some of the teams we liked, and some of the our overall journey through wrestling as fans, we kind of followed a similar path due to our age. So he has a lot of the same memories as me, and he has a lot of the same favorites as me. So he thought it would be cool to hear my favorite tag teams of all time. And I love this idea. So Michael, thank you very much. And I appreciate you donating to have this done. This should be a lot of fun. Also, if you want to give Mike a follow over on Twitter, I threw his Twitter handle right down in the description below. So please go down there, shoot him a follow, and thank him for this video, because he is the reason for it. And I thought it would give us something fun and different to do for the weekend, because holidays are, most people are at home, not doing much, not working or whatever. So hopefully you guys can hang out and watch this either live or after the fact. Either way, I hope you're able to enjoy it. In 48 hours, 2 nights from tonight, is our final end-of-year video. We're going to review Monday Night Raw as soon as Raw goes off the air on Monday night. Then we're going to stick around for an extra couple of hours, and we're going to do a big Q&A. This is something that I tend to do every year at the end of the year, and I let you guys send in questions, and we just hang out. I'll probably pop a few cold ones. We'll toast the new year and say goodbye to this rat-awful, horrible 2020. And I've got a bunch of questions ready that you guys have been sending in. There's still time if you want to try to send one in. Send it to my email at goodmikework@gmail.com, and I'll have a whole bunch of questions pre-selected. I've got about 50-ish so far on the email, and I'm also going to be answering questions all throughout the night in the chat, and I'll make sure I knock out every single super chat that's sent, and I'll try to answer as many others in the actual chat that I can. So it'll basically just be a hangout after we review Raw. If it's a shitty Raw, we will blow through it in 15 minutes and get it the hell out of the way and start having fun. If it's a big Raw with lots of stuff going on, we'll spend some time on that. Then we'll move into the Q&A. Either way, Monday night's going to be fun, so mark your calendars and make sure you're here, because we should have some entertaining times Monday night. Hope you guys can make it. In terms of how this list is going to go, like I said, it's my top 10 favorite tag teams of all time from WCW and WWE, but I want to let you know who I'm excluding, because I saw a lot of comments right away here in the chat, and in terms of my favorite teams, I had to do had to make a lot of decisions in my head. And one thing I decided on is that I wanted to focus mostly on actual tag teams. There's been a lot of great alliances. There's been 2 guys put together that have done big things, and I'm talking about big stars. So what I decided to do is exclude teams that consisted of 2 major single stars that had already been world champion and then put together and they win titles, like the Brothers of Destruction. They're not, they're not eligible for this. 2-Man Power Trip, who somebody brought up, they're not eligible for this. To me, they weren't a tag team. They were 2 guys put together, won the tag belts and dominated, but they're ineligible in terms of this. Randy Savage, Hulk Hogan, Mega Powers, another example. DX, Shawn Michaels, Triple H, another example. So teams like that, I completely excluded, and I tried to focus on teams that had the majority of their run as tag teams. Not all of it. A lot of these teams broke off and did singles, but they were actual teams in the tag team division, and that's where they stayed for a good portion of their career. And that's not the case when things got a lot jumbled up. And this started happening around the Attitude Era. That's when I noticed it happening. You didn't see this shit happen in the 90s, because the Mega Powers, if the Mega Powers would have been around during the Attitude Era, they would have put the tag belts on them. It wasn't even thought of. It didn't even occur to them or me as a fan back when the Mega Powers were together that they should face, the Hart Foundation or Demolition or whoever the fuck the tag team champions were then for the titles. That's not something that they would have done back then. So nowadays, you see that all the time. Shawn and Cena main evented WrestleMania as tag team champions. That's wacky. So that's the type of stuff I try to just avoid in this. And a lot of those slapped together tag teams, Rock and Undertaker won the tag belts. Austin and Steve won the tag belts. Austin and Taker won the tag belts. So many guys won the belts together. Those teams are just not going to be a part of this. So I hope that doesn't upset anybody. But at the end here, after I get through, I'm going to roll through my top 10. Right before we get to number 1, I'm going to roll through all of my honorable mentions as well. I've bumped the mic cord twice. I'm sorry. I'm going to run through all my honorable mentions as well and kind of explain why I didn't put some of these teams on the list, because there's going to be some teams here that are like, hey, what about them? What about them? What about them? Don't worry. We'll get to them. But I had to really struggle to decide who's going to make my top 10 and for what reason. And I also tried to include teams from multiple eras. I wanted it to be a really well-rounded top 10, where it's just not just focused on one time period or anything like that, and had some, because, I'm much older than a lot of my audience. Who wants to sit here and listen to me talk about shit that happened in the mid-'80s, for 2 hours. So I wanted to try to make the list as diverse as possible in terms of time period and, what these teams were like and the styles they had and that sort of stuff. So I think it's a good list, and I hope you guys do too. Let me bust out a couple of quick super chats and we will get moving here. Probably have a low audience today since it's kind of a weird video. So if you don't mind, please smash that thumbs up button for me if you would. And please subscribe if you've not yet already. We're scratching the door on 31,000 on the channel, crawling like a fucking turtle, but we're doing it. So please subscribe if you haven't. I got a shout out. Oh, How Wheezy, how's it going, man? I want to shout out How Wheezy as well. If you guys did watch SmackDown last night, this fool was in the front row the whole time on the Thunderdome. You can't miss him. You big old melon head. I'm kidding, How Wheezy. I spotted you right away. Like from the minute it went live, I saw you. And I hadn't even read your DM yet. I read your DM after I saw you. And then you had kind of circled it and pointed me out. So you were really easy to see. And they didn't even look like they moved you around. I always heard in the Thunderdome that they moved you around, but you were like there the whole show. So that's awesome. So check them out. Black shirt, I think you were wearing, something like that. Another monkey wrench is here. Barry, what's up, dude? Thanks for the $2. Greetings from Hawaii. Am I sure Teddy Long didn't sponsor this? I don't know, Mike. Are you related to Teddy? He might be. They look a little bit alike. I'm kidding. George Morris, what's going on, man? Appreciate the $5. Hey, Greg, how was your Christmas? Mine was good. Cobra Kai Season 3 coming out January 1st. Can't wait to get a picture of my 3 cats. Good to see you, George. Thank you very much. Merry Christmas to you, too. Hope yours was awesome. Had a feeling about Season 3 jumping the gun there because they released that initial trailer a few weeks back or a couple months back, and it said January 8th. And then after that, every single promotional trailer that they put out or any social media post that they made all of a sudden didn't list the release date anymore. It just said January. So we knew they weren't going to postpone it. If they did that, they were going to have a riot on their hands. So in my head, I'm like, they're going to bump it up. I bet you it's going to be New Year's Day. And yesterday, they made that official announcement, or maybe the day before. So that's a done deal now. Cobra Kai starts on the 1st. I'm excited, but I'm also a little bit bummed out. My girlfriend and I made actual special plans with our jobs to be off on January 8th so we could just binge watch the whole thing. And now it released early is fucking our shit up. So I can't believe I'm actually saying this, that I'm bummed out it's coming out a week early, but it kind of messed up my plans a little bit. Either way, I got to watch it. I can't wait. It's going to be good. Sorry to bore you non-Cobra Kai fans out there. We'll get to the video now here, or we'll get to the actual countdown here in just a second. I think that's it for the super chats. You know what, man? No, Andre and Aku are Mega Powers not eligible here, but Ratnick, I thought about. I was trying to think of a female team. I was like, it might be time. Now we just haven't had anybody that's gotten that quite established. I really wanted to include some females here. I couldn't put the Jumping Bomb Angels on there. You know, that's when it comes to top 10 favorite teams, come on, they had one match in WWE, so. Or like 4 matches in WWE. Wasn't much. So I couldn't add a team like them. And then in modern times, most of these teams are slapped together. They're not actual teams. Probably the only one that could be potentially be on this list would be Sasha and Bailey. And I thought about it. I really did. If they made the list, they would have gone in at number 10. But in the end, I decided not to. But when I do a video like this again, maybe in 5 years, I'd like to include a female team. That would be wonderful. But unfortunately, the women will be absent from this top 10. But anyway, why don't we start at the bottom at number 10. I got to make sure I go in between my graphics here so you guys can see this. Number 10, the Hollywood Blondes. Stone Cold Steve Austin and Brian Pillman. They are actually my favorite tag team in WCW history. I just really like them. I have fond memories of them. They weren't together long, like a year. I remember they got together in like late 92, and by late 93, they were splitting up. So it was like a 1-year run. So they just barely made my list here. And I think the only reason they did is just because mainly of my memories of them. I loved watching them on TV, loved watching them on WCW Saturday night. They were very entertaining together. And we've heard Austin tell the story so many times about how he was kind of pissed off that they were put together because they were slapped together. When Austin thought he had plans to have a run with the U.S. title, they decided to, give that to somebody else. I think this was a lot of Dusty's decision, and then just take 2 guys that they didn't really have anything to do with and put them together. Some of the best teams ever has been created like that. Probably the most notable are the New Age Outlaws. I think Pillman and Austin had a little bit more to offer than Road Dogg and Billy Gunn at that time, so they were kind of, they couldn't fail almost. And once they got together, they got on the same page. They embraced being a team. They started dressing alike, coming up with ideas, making matching outfits, shit like that, coming up with stuff to do on TV to get themselves over and be entertaining. They got rolling, and they turned out to be a great, great heel team. And they reprised, this Hollywood Blonde gimmick that has been done, 3 or 4 times probably at least, regionally. for them to take it, to that level in WCW was really fun. And they had some great promos. They played off each other well. Their chemistry was great, and they were one of my favorite duos ever. But as the story goes, that wasn't really what they were designed to do. And that's the politic part of wrestling that can be so frustrating sometimes, is that we've seen this in WWE in modern times. You can't get over unless you've been given permission to get over. And that's always been a problem. It's a problem now. It was a problem back then. Probably wasn't that big of an issue so much in the Attitude Era, because when guys got over, they ran with it. But back in these times, if that wasn't really in the cards, politically, other guys, people like that would try to keep you down and fuck your shit up and everything. And once they got over and had a run with the tag belts, which also wasn't very long. I know they beat Steamboat and Douglas for him. I remember watching that match. And but they would, I don't know, 4-month run. So I can't remember what it was. It wasn't a very long run with the titles, but they were entertaining as tag team champions. And then when they did they a lot of their promos, like I said, were super entertaining. And then they had that flair for the old one, because I think when they dropped the titles, that's when they were feuding with the Horsemen, I think. And that's when Flair came back. Flair had just come back in '93 after having the run in WWE and everything. And that's when they gave Flair the flair for the gold show, and they spoofed it with the flair for the old. And Pillman is playing Flair, and he's falling asleep and all that. That shit is just great. And that to me is just some of my most fondest memories of that time, because I would watch WCW all the time. I didn't follow them the way I followed WWE, but they just happened to be on TV a lot of times when I was home. I'd just be flipping through on a Saturday afternoon in the summer on the Superstation, and boom, there they are. And they cracked me up, even as somebody who was younger and was, when you're younger, you do tend to like the baby faces and not like the heels. But I thought these guys were fucking hilarious. And later on, when they went to, break up, you would think that their feud would be pretty awesome, and it wasn't. It was kind of a dud in both companies because of Pillman's injury. They never had a chance to really get it going in WWE a few years later. And here it was kind of treated more like a joke. I know Colonel Robert Parker kind of showed an interest in Austin, and I think wound up, they broke him off to put Austin with Parker to do a singles run. And, that led to a bunch of matches, but a lot of it was, Pillman trying to get revenge on Parker and all that shit. So it never really, I think, they were never utilized to their full potential. They could have had a 3-year run here, even longer, maybe. Now, if that would have happened, we might never have gotten, Austin and ECW, Austin and WWE. Had, the Hollywood Blondes lasted any longer at all, he might have not been released in 1995 or end of 94 and gone on to WWE. So, or no, end of 95. So that might have never happened. So, we don't want to wish for that, but for the short time they were together, they were entertaining. They were one of the bright spots in WCW, and they both had such ridiculous chemistry and charisma that, and look at them, they're 2 fucking Hall of Famers, even though Brian's technically not in. They were great. So I just remember them fondly, loved it, and really wish they would have done more, not only with the team, but with the breakup. The breakup could have been better too. If they would have just ran together for like another year, then broke up, and worked for a year for like the U.S. title, my God, heads up their asses, man. The WCW, I'll tell you. Barry, what's your super chat say there? Thank you for 2 more. I love the story of Booker T and Goldust team. Yeah, I guess they're eligible. I wouldn't say they weren't eligible, but they didn't make my top 10. They didn't even make my honorable mentions, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, technically, I guess they were a team. I would count them, I suppose, because they had. They were fun. They were real fun together. But anyway, Hollywood Blondes comes in at number 10. Number 9, the Steiner Brothers. I loved the Steiner Brothers. They'd be higher up on this list, but I think their growth got stunted a couple of times. I wasn't a huge fan of their WWE run or anything like that. And then later on, it got real weird when they broke up and Scott got so big and everything. But they're one of my favorite tag teams in terms of look. First of all, they're Michigan boys. I'm from Michigan, originally born there. All my family went to Michigan State, so they'd be pissed off at me if I was supporting some Wolverines here. But to me, it was like, it was local pride. I was living down south, and I like to see, my Michigan boys, kicking ass on pro wrestling, because it sure as hell wasn't happening in sports. So I enjoyed that they were kind of from my neck of the woods. I attached to them right away. They were another team, much like the Hollywood Blondes, that I really kind of latched onto and was attracted to in WCW. They were one of my favorite teams to watch. I found them intriguing. I found them interesting. They had a really, really good look, with the kind of the collegiate type of stuff. And plus they had like credibility, and they had a really good contrast because Scott and Robbie were so different, with the headgear and, and Scott can do some of the crazy acrobatic moves. They looked different. I thought they were a good, contrasting duo. And with the amateur background, like I said, it really added credibility. They looked and felt like a really, really tough team, and they were super fun to watch. And they were awesome, and they were great in WCW. I loved them. Scott, like I said, I think really stood out. But, Rick was unique, you know, he did with the dog-faced gremlin and he barked and you kind of didn't know where he was. You thought he was a little, you know, maybe out there, a little bit nuts, loose cannon, unpredictable, uncontrollable, that sort of thing. Where, you know, Scott had, you know, more the level head, and I felt like he was a little bit more the athlete of the two, even though Rick was really good. They won the WCW tag team title 7 times, I believe, or NWA and WCW. And some of their runs and matches were great around that time, and they were super fun to watch in WCW. I just remember watching them and hearing like Jim Ross on the call. You know, they had their a lot of like Sting had the same thing. There's a lot of guys in WCW had that custom theme song. I wasn't a huge fan of their theme, but I just remember it, Steiner Line, you know, from WCW. Even though I didn't really like it, it's like burned into my fucking brain. So I just remember them and just watching them and being entertained by them, even though I was more of a WWE fan. So when they made the jump, I guess it was like 92, late 92, they turned up. Because back then you didn't know. I didn't know they had left WCW and we'd be showing up in WWE soon. It wasn't like now. I didn't have a subscription to the Torch yet. I wasn't following the sheets in 92. I wasn't even really calling hotlines around that time. So they just showed up on TV and I'm like, holy shit, the Steiner Brothers are here. That's fucking awesome. And then just a few months later, Jim Ross entered the company at WrestleMania 9 in the toga. As a matter of fact, I think, can't remember if it was the first match or not, but one of the first matches on the WrestleMania 9 card was Steiners and Head Shrinkers. And just to hear Jim Ross calling a Steiner Brothers match inside of a WWE ring to a 16-year-old kid was pretty whack and pretty cool at the same time. So I loved when they got there. Unfortunately, you know, their run was really, really underwhelming in the WWE. It should have been great. Like, look at this picture of them. They just look like badasses. They look great with the belts. They had a good look. There's no reason why WWE shouldn't have pushed these guys to the absolute fucking moon. But I think it all goes back to that, you know, Vince didn't create them. You know, just like the Road Warriors and shit, you know, he didn't make them. So it wasn't going to be like high on his priority, but they should have been dominant. You know, they should have been the next British Bulldogs. For real. Oh, imagine that match. Imagine 93 Steiners and 86 Bulldogs. My God. So, you know, they could have like almost taken that legacy over. You could have brought Captain Lou in to fucking manage him if you wanted. It would have been cool. So, you know, they didn't really have as good a run in not nearly as good a run in WWE as the names they already made for themselves in WCW and NWA and Japan and a lot of the places that they wrestled and just dominated coming in. You would think around that time when the tag team division already kind of sucked, there would be no stopping this team. But it really didn't happen that way. Both of their title runs came on house shows. I remember that. They did not win these belts on TV. They beat, might have been Money Inc., you know, on one. I think they held the belt for like one day and then dropped, because they would do that sometimes. You would tune into TV on like Challenge or Superstars, and they would say, oh, there's a tag title change over the weekend. Oh, and they dropped it back the next day. This happened with the Intercontinental title a little bit too. They did this once or twice. So I think they beat like Money Inc. at a house show, maybe in New York or something. And then like the next day or the day after, they lost the belts to them. All this happened in between two TVs. So technically they're former tag team champions, but no fans ever got to see them with the titles. You never saw the Steiners with the titles. It wasn't until their second run, they won at a house show. I think they beat Money Inc. again, to win the titles. And then they had a little bit of a run, 3-4 months, something like that. And I'll never forget, they dropped the belts to the Quebecers on Raw. It was Province of Quebec rules. And I remember something fishy. I watched this whole thing live. I was so pissed because I didn't like the Quebecers. I didn't give a shit about them at all. And I really, really, really like the Steiners. And like I said, their presentation and their music. I like their music in WWE much better than their music in WCW. I just like that kind of collegiate type of, you know, march they came out to. I just liked it. I don't know why. But the match with the Quebecers was so damn stupid. It was a way to get the belts off them without beating them clean. I understand that. But it was a deal where Province of Quebec rules, DQs result in a title loss. So I think there was a hockey stick or something. Some weapon was brought in. One of the Quebecers got nailed with it, got DQ'd, and the belts got passed to the Quebecers. And the Steiners never got them back. That was it. And there's been stories, you know, we've heard throughout the years that they were frustrated in WWE, didn't really like to run there. They wanted out, didn't like the way they were treated. And they had every reason to feel that way, you know, because unless they had some attitude problems or whatever backstage, which at that time, I don't believe Scott did. Scott got nuts, of course, later on in life. But around this time, as far as I'm concerned, I thought he had his head screwed on straight. These guys weren't troublemakers. They weren't drug addicts, nothing like that. And they didn't have, you know, too many attitude problems backstage. Probably no more than any other team with their stature, maybe like LOD or something, in terms of just protecting themselves. But why they didn't really give them a better run and more of a dominant run? I'll never know, because I think they could have been money in WWE and wouldn't have ever had to go back to WCW, which they did. Won the tag team belts back there again, in the mid 90s, and that would last all the way up until, I guess, 98. And I remember watching the Steiners win the belts back, around 95 and 96 and even 97. And when all that was happening, you're watching Scott get bigger, and he's changing a lot. He's already huge. He's already jacked, but he's getting bigger and bigger and stiffer and stiffer. And, this guy that used to just be able to do so many acrobatic moves in the ring, he's becoming less and less capable the bigger he's getting. He can still do the Frankensteiner and stuff, but, it didn't look as good as it did back in the day. And he was just getting huge, stupidly huge. So eventually that led to, them doing the split. I know it was against the NWO, and Scott turned on Rick and bashed him in the back and joined the NWO, bleached his hair, and then he kind of became, the Ric Flair superstar, Billy Graham, shit-talking type of guy. And I was never really a fan of that. Didn't really like Scott Steiner after the Steiner Brothers. I thought he became way too big. I thought it limited his work in the ring. And even when he came into the WWE, I didn't like him there. He had that stinker of a match with Triple H at the Royal Rumble, I think in 03, that was just an embarrassment. I'm like, man, think of if 1994 Scott Steiner would have been in the ring with Triple H instead of 2004 or 2003 Scott Steiner. Imagine how good that match would have been. So I was always a little bit disappointed about how the Steiners kind of fizzled out. And I know they'd go on to reunite a couple times here or there or whatever. But, to me, their big run was like 88 through 93 or 94, when they left WWE, and a little bit when they returned to WCW. But to me, even then, even 95, 96, Bloom was off the rose type of thing. But they are still one of my favorite teams in terms of how they looked and their presentation and how good they were on the ring and the titles they won and their credibility. All that easily puts them on the list. And, probably one of the only bright spots. It's not even really a bright spot because I think the match was a schmaz, but it looked great on paper. It's on one of my WrestleFest VHS tapes. It's Steiner Brothers versus Brett and Owen. It was right when Brett and Owen started that angle. That was the match probably happened right before or right after Survivor Series 93. Not sure when, but it was when Brett and Owen were still on the same page, and it was Brett and Owen against, the Steiners. And it was awesome, just to see all of them in there. How often do you get to see Bret Hart and Scott Steiner work together? I mean, I think they crossed paths a few times later on in WCW, but back then, based on where Bret Hart was in his career, singles run world title contender, and where Scott was, they were never going to cross paths. So the fact that this match happened, I thought was pretty cool and pretty legendary, even though I'm pretty sure it was a DQ or something. There was bad blood. I think they came together and had some respect at the end. I don't remember. You guys can look up the result. But from what I remember of it, I think it was some sort of a disqualification and then a little bit of brawl, pushing and shoving, and then they came back together and had the mutual respect at the end, if I remember. But that was probably one of the only memorable matches, in terms of, the epicness of it that they ever had in WWE. And everything else, based on, like I said, the tag division at the time, they should have had a much bigger run than that. We'll move on to number 8 in just a second. Let me cruise up here, knock out a few super chats that were rolling in while I was flapping my trap. Good to see the audience climbing a little bit in here. Smash that thumbs up button for me if you don't mind. And if you're wondering where the hell the Winged Eagle podcast is, it'll be back next Saturday at normal time. I just figured that this week was going to be light with news and everything. And, aside from last night's SmackDown, which was good, I didn't think we could fill a 2-hour podcast. So we're doing this instead. And Monday night, we got a big one too. Year-end Q&A. Don't forget. Immediately after Raw. Who was next? Sup? No, I'm sorry, Chris Minor. No, Nerdscape said Sup. Chris Minor, you're next, man. Thank you for the $5. I appreciate it. Sup, Greg? I'd have to think about the other 7, but my top 3 are Dudleys, Los Guerreros, and New Age Outlaws. That's a pretty cool top 3. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. None of them are in my top 10. Not even the Dudleys. And I'll explain why. They're in my honorable mentions. If this was a top 10 greatest tag teams of all time, where I'm thinking just in terms of resume and how many titles they won and where they've been and where they traveled in their longevity, Dudley Boys would be on my top 3 too. But this is my favorite. So that's why they're not there. And I almost had them there. They were actually in the next spot. They were at number 8, and I bumped them out for another team. And I used that logic. I said, they should be on the list if it's the greatest teams, but I like this other team more than the Dudleys, so I bumped them. They were actually number 8, and I bumped them out. But appreciate the 5, and stay tuned to see who number 8 is. Chris, what's up, man? Good to see you. Appreciate the 5. Hope you had a great Christmas. I did. I hope you did too. If Pillman lived through the Attitude Era, do you think WWF would have reunited with him and Austin for a short run? Probably not. Austin, nobody... You wouldn't want to put anything in the way of Austin. He was on a rocket ship. Even at that point in 97, they could see it happening. So when he won the title in 98, I think he could have done some stuff with Pillman for sure on TV, whether it be an alliance, or a feud. But Pillman's injury was going to limit him anyway. So even if he lived, he'd pretty much be wrestling on one leg or working on one leg. So I think that it would have been cool to see them together, though, in some fashion. Maybe Pillman coming in to help him out against Vince or something like that. Maybe Pillman's off TV, jumps a barricade, bashes Vince in the head with a chair, and, because Vince has got all the stooges and 100 guys out there against Austin, and Austin gets a little bit of backup in the form of Pillman. Maybe they do a beer toast the next night on Raw or whatever, and Pillman has kind of a limited role in the company or something like that, and then maybe turns heel and joins with McMahon and joins, the corporation or something, because then he can kind of be, hidden a little bit, and he doesn't have to worry about, all that weight on his ankle type of thing. Depends. I think the injury would have definitely hindered him a bit, but I would have liked to see them have some sort of TV presence, the two of them together, whether it be an alliance, a feud, or whatever. But at that time in 98, I just can't see them putting the belts on Pillman and Austin, like the tag belts. Just Austin was in a different place. Would have been cool though. Wouldn't have hated it, that's for sure. Devlin Husband, what's up? Greetings from Hawaii. Hope you had a wonderful Christmas, my friend. I did. I hope you did too. Oh, man, we're so lucky, aren't we? Me and you. He's in Hawaii. I'm in San Diego. I don't know, not a cloud in the fucking sky yesterday for Christmas. Just a perfect weather and warmth and awesomeness, and he's pretty much got the same thing there. Glad you're here, dude, to hang out with us. And thanks for another one, Chris. Appreciate the $2. Oh, you changed your mind. Number 1 is Strowman and Nicholas. Well, you gave it away. Everybody knows who my number 1 is going to be, and that's it. So we'll talk about Strowman and Nicholas here in just a bit. All right. And what's up, Mr. E? Good to see you as well. And no, Cyborg Skyscrapers are not on the list as well, although I did like them kind of. Yeah, you'll hear about a lot of teams here in a second. All right, that leaves us where we are on the list here. We just finished up number 9. Next up is number 8, and this is the one that I said originally was going to be the Dudley Boys, but I changed it because you know why? I like Edge and Christian better. Edge and Christian, they didn't have a run as nearly as long as the Dudleys or anything like that, but when I thought about that Attitude Era tag division that they had at that time that was reborn, as best tag team wrestling has been since the mid-'80s when WWE had all those great teams. And not only was the division the best that it's been, it was completely different. It was turned on its ear. The tag team wrestling changed during this time when the Dudleys, Edge and Christian, Hardys there were tearing it up during that time in the, tables, ladders, and chairs matches and all that shit. And Edge and Christian were a big part of that. Edge came in on his own, wasn't really doing much, struggling to kind of, get over and evolve as a character and stuff. And that's when they brought Christian in as his brother. And they put them together. And that's when they finally started to find their niche, because they joined with Gangrel, formed the Brood, and that great entrance they had. And those were good training wheels, I think, for Edge and Christian. Gave them a little bit of chance to talk on the mic, gave them a lot of TV experience, and just a lot of experience during that short time. And I think one of the matches that really helped get them on the map was later on, I think kind of near the run of the end of the run with Gangrel, even though I think they were still with him. They did the match at No Mercy, which I watched live at my house in 1999, the ladder match that kind of jump-started all of this. And for back then, it was for like money and like the services of Terry Runnels. There was no title on the line even then. But you put these 4 guys in a tag team ladder match, something that we hadn't seen before. I'm pretty sure that was the first tag ladder match ever. Can't recall one prior to that. And it was one that I was interested in. And I remember at the time, my roommate, we had a house together. She was just my roommate. We lived together for about a year. And she wasn't home, but her brother was there staying with us. He was like sleeping on the couch. And he was from like Western North Carolina. So he just happened to be there. And I was like, hey, I'm going to be ordering the pay-per-view tonight, if you want to watch. I was like, do you watch wrestling? He's like, yeah, kind of. I sort of watch it. I know who some of the players are. And I was like, good, that'll be on later if you want to hang out. So he hung out and watched it with me. And this match was so fun because I love watching like a non-fan or a casual fan or somebody that doesn't really know wrestling very much watch a match and just be mesmerized by it. And he watched that ladder match. He goes, I've never seen anything like that in my fucking life. It was that good. And, you know, when you look back on it now through 2020, guys, go back and watch that 1999 ladder match. It's not even that great. But for 99, it was the craziest shit you ever saw. It even outdid and was more creative with some of the spots that Shawn and Razor had at WrestleMania 10. So it was all just super, super new, and we hadn't seen that yet. And they killed each other in that match. The Hardy Boys won the match. The next night on Raw, there's the handshake, the show of respect, and I think that's when the fans kind of took notice. And I remember, for me, that was just a great moment. I'm like, especially to see the Hardys, and I'm going to be talking about them pretty soon. So not to let the cat out of the bag, but for the Hardys who, you know, were from my neck of the woods, from North Carolina, to see kind of them get over after being in the company as jobbers for so long, along with Edge and Christian, who, you know, really hadn't, you know, the fans were noticing, knew who they were and everything, but fans weren't like popping or going crazy when they came through the curtain yet. They weren't super duper over, and this got them the respect of the fans, and that really helped. And I think where my respect, well, that's about the Hardys. I'll wait for that later, you know, when I'll talk about that match. But when my respect really started kicking in for Edge and Christian was when they started to evolve a little bit, because after that match, they remained, I think they were baby faces, right? Going all the way into 2000. And then they went into the WrestleMania 16 ladder match with everybody. And the Dudleys, I think, were involved in that too, right? And that's when they won the titles. And they were still baby faces around that time, but you kind of see the slow, subtle turn into being a heel. And I thought that when they did that and they realized that the fans weren't into them as much as the other teams who were taking crazy bumps, and I've talked about this many times before, go back and watch my SummerSlam 2000 review from earlier on this year, 20-year anniversary review. And I talked about I was there live, and I talked about that ladder match. And I remember around that time, the fans, the dirt sheets, what the internet would be now, a lot of the smart fans were, keep doing that. A lot of the smart fans were very upset with Edge and Christian because they felt like they weren't paying their dues. They weren't, they weren't carrying their weight out there, because it was the Dudleys and especially the Hardys that were taking the insane bumps. And if you remember back then, Edge and Christian were not falling 20 feet through 6 tables off ladders. They were pretty much avoiding a lot of these big bumps. They took a lot of big bumps in the ring, but they didn't do a whole lot with tables and ladders and breaking and smashing shit. They didn't do a lot of that, but yet they won every single one of these matches, and the fans were getting all butthurt about it. Oh, they always win, and blah, 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 blah. It was just, I just laugh so hard now, because you think about Edge and Christian, one of the most legendary tag teams of all time. Back then, the fans were all butthurt because they just like they are now. They didn't feel like they were doing enough. But for me, that tied in perfectly to their heel persona, because right after they won the titles at WrestleMania, they started getting a little snotty with the fans, remember? And started making fun of them, started taking pot shots. Then they turned heel, and then every week it turned into this big thing where they would just insult 20,000 people, and just the atmosphere, the crowd reaction to what they said and what they did, coming out there making fun of their sports teams, and the hilarious promos that they had backstage and in the ring, some of the alliances they had, or chemistry they had with other guys like Kurt Angle, like Mick Foley, was gold. They were so goddamn entertaining, and it almost felt like it happened overnight. As soon as they made that switch, from baby faces to heel, it was like off and running. They had just enough experience up until that point to know how to work the crowd and talk in the mic and that sort of stuff. It was just like the perfect blend. And plus, since the smart fans were annoyed with him, it made them great heels, cocky heels, and they were hilarious how well their mic skills improved and how much chemistry they had and how much charisma each one of them had. Even Christian is way funnier than people give him credit for. He was hilarious in those, pretending. I remember he was, they'd come out and say, greetings to all of our fans here, whatever. And he does that one week. I think they're in Albany. He goes, greetings to all of our fans here. And he didn't know where it is. And Edge like whispers in his ear and he goes, Albany. Like he doesn't even know how to say the names of the towns, shit like that. They made fun of the Yankees and, and shit like that they did. It was just really, really fun and entertaining. And then of course, the best one was the 5-second pose, which I saw many of live. Daniel, if you're in the chat, how many 5-second poses have we seen in person? Probably a lot. And sometimes we get lucky with a 7-second pose, 10-second pose, 20-second pose, first time ever, 30-second pose, shit like that. But back then, think of how quick technology changes. Nowadays, does a 10-year-old know what the fuck flash photography is? I don't think so. But I had the benefit of flash photography back in those days. And to me, they were so entertaining. I was never not happy to see them. Heels or baby faces, loved it every time, loved that they won, loved that it bothered the fans that they won. I took great joy in that, to watch all these know-it-all fans who think that they know what kind of shit you got to do in the ring to be able to get your opportunity to get awarded with a title. You got to go out there and break your fucking neck through 6 tables to get a title. To me, it's a lot smarter to not have to do that and still win all the titles. So, Edge and Christian, I think, prolonged their careers a little bit just by not wrestling that crazy style. Although, shit, Jeff is still in the ring and Edge is not, so that doesn't make any sense. But, in terms of the bumps that the 3 teams were taking, Edge and Christian always got off easy. And I was there, like I said, for the TLC match at SummerSlam 2000, and they would do the next one at WrestleMania 17, and they would win again. So they won multiple. I didn't write it down. Shit, a lot of the teams here, I wrote down how many times they won the title. I didn't write it down here for Edge and Christian, but how many tag title runs they had, there was a lot. And the run as a team wasn't very long. And that was another thing that I had to consider whether or not I put them on my list. Dudleys were together for all those years. Edge and Christian, what did they have? Maybe they probably had a 3-year at the most run, 98 through like 01. Then Edge won the King of the Ring, and then it was singles and it was over. Aside from, reuniting here or there, throughout the years, they never, really returned to that form. But during that time, it was a very memorable time in wrestling, much like the mid 80s with the, Hogan era that occupies a huge space, in my wrestling memory. This time period is the same thing, the Attitude Era and all those great tag matches and all those great teams. Not only did you have them, but you had, Too Cool and a lot of other teams kind of getting over at that time. And it was just a fun time for tag team wrestling in the Attitude Era, and Edge and Christian were a big part of that. And like I said, they were entertaining, they were hilarious, and I was never not entertained by anything they did. And I might not be able to say the same thing with the Dudleys. I got a little bit tired of the what's up stuff and shit like that. Edge and Christian were just, to me, always funny. Kazoo's rule, things like that. I mean, everything they did just fucking cracks me up. So that's why they're on this list. That's why they're my number 8. And I absolutely love Edge and Christian. Number 7, this one might surprise you how high up they are on the list, but I'm going with the Road Warriors, Legion of Doom at number 7. This might be a lot of fans' number 1. I think when the general wrestling public looks at the greatest tag teams in history, Legion of Doom is either 1 or 1A or 2. And I agree with that. But in terms of my favorite, they didn't do enough. To me, a lot of reason why they're number 7 and not number 2 is because just like the Steiners and some other teams here, their runs in WWE were really underwhelming and kind of like mismanaged a little bit. And of course they had their huge, and they had their big runs prior. They were AWA Tag Team Champions and NWA Tag Team Champions prior to coming there. They had gotten over huge, wrestled in Georgia, all over the world, all over the country, and gotten over huge and won some titles, created a big name for themselves. And by the time they got to WWE, you think they should walk in the door and be champs the next day and champs for 3 years straight, but it didn't really work like that. They had the greatest look in the history of the business. I mean, look at these bastards. Look at that. Do you want to fuck with those guys? I wouldn't. I mean, their look, I think, was probably the best. They were probably the best looking tag team that wrestling has ever seen. I mean, they just look like $1 million. Both big powerhouses, but different at the same time. Even though they were both huge and jacked and could kill you with one hand, they were different in the ring. Hawk was super agile. Hawk could glide around that ring. Very Randy Savage, very Randy Orton-like. The way Hawk could move around, climb up to the top rope like it was nothing. And for a guy who's 275, 280, whatever the hell he is, he just moved so smoothly in the ring, and I love that. Where Animal would just come in, much like a Jim Neidhart would, and just barrel you over and beat you up and pick you up, smash you, press slam you, and throw you around the ring and shit. So they were a really good contrast in styles there. The Paul Ellering alliance really helped them too, I think, prior to their WWE run and everything. And so they make this huge career for themselves. They blaze this trail. They're, the most over and the hottest and the biggest tag team wrestling has ever seen. Vince, according to everybody that's ever talked about this, has always wanted the Road Warriors. He wanted them, but can never get them. That's why he created his own Road Warriors in Demolition. Right there. That's why they brought in the Powers of Pain. They brought in the lookalike teams, but they never got the real deal. So when they did get the real deal in 1990, I love the Hart Foundation. You're going to find out later on how much I love the Hart Foundation. But I almost feel like the Harts were in the way of what would be. It's just like they did the same thing with Legion of Doom and Demolition that they did with Hogan and Flair. Dudes, you had just a huge match in your lap, in the palm of your hand, and you pissed it away. Because when they came in 1990, Demolition was still hot. They were still running strong. They were heels now. I didn't like the heel turn because, you know, when they won the titles at WrestleMania 6, I thought that was awesome. And then they added Crush and Bill Eadie was going to be phased out. Even though all that was happening and I hated that, the team was still strong and it was still Demolition and it still was riding all that momentum. So when LOD came in, they should have been immediately programmed with Demolition before Demolition fizzled out. That should have been the match you did right away. You should have pushed for that first. Oh, I hate saying this. It almost tears my own heart out to say this. But instead of Heart Foundation and Demolition at SummerSlam 90, my favorite tag team match of all time, it really should have been Legion of Doom against Demolition at SummerSlam 1990. That's what it should have been. And been a great city for them to win in, too, Philly. You know, even though they weren't from there, you know, Philly and, you know, Chicago, they're kind of similar. Both cold cities with tough people living in them. So I think that would have been the way to go there and the right way to go. But instead, you know, you bring this team in and you keep them with the most dominant team ever, and you keep them away from the titles for a year, which kind of allows them to just kind of flounder a little bit. I hate to say flounder when it comes to the LOD because WWE did do a good job with their presentation. I loved their WWE theme music, still to this day. I think it's one of the best WWE themes ever. It's just badass and rocking. So I loved it. And to me, they should have just been champs right away. But instead, they got involved in SummerSlam 90, actually kind of helped the Hearts out a little bit for them to defeat Demolition and win the titles. But then the Hearts had their run, followed by the Nasty Boys run. And LOD did not get a shot at the titles until the following SummerSlam at 1991. And by then, they had already had their feud with Demolition, but it sucked, you know, because then Demolition isn't the champs anymore. Then they started wearing the masks, and it didn't feel right. It wasn't good. It didn't feel like this epic dream match. Holy shit, we're finally getting LOD and Demolition because it was too late. They were like a year too late because Crush was now there. If they could have gotten Demolition in 89, Road Warriors in 89 and feuded them in 89, that probably would have been much better. But by the time you got to 90 and Axe was on his way out and they were replacing him with Crush, you know, I think there was still time, but then after they lost the titles, you know, you pretty much figured that LOD was going to not only beat them in matches, but, you know, win the program and things like that. So it's just they just dropped the ball, you know. So that all happened. Their feud with Demolition came and went. As a matter of fact, Demolition was already out of the WWE by the time you got to SummerSlam 1991. Darso would be repackaged as Repo Man, and Crush would be repackaged later on. So they weren't even around. And then you put LOD against the Nasty Boys in Madison Square Garden, which was a great match and a great moment. I can't remember who took the Doomsday device. Can't remember if it was Knobs or Sags. They hit that. He spins completely around, pins him. MSG explodes. You know, Heenan and Gorilla and Roddy on the call. It was all great moment. Loved it, but felt like it was a year too late. Felt like they could have done the same match a year prior against Demolition with the same pop and the same reaction from the fans, and would have given LOD now a whole lot of momentum coming into the company and beating their top team right off the bat. But that wasn't something that Vince really did. They had to stay there a year, one whole year, until they put the belts on the Road Warriors. So I remember that kind of being underwhelming. And then they lost them, I believe, at a house show or something like that to Money Inc. They kept doing that shit on house show all the time back then. I don't know why. And then it looked like they were going to get another kind of push there at WrestleMania 8. They didn't work, but they had cut a promo, brought in Paul Ellering. So Paul Ellering came into the company and joined them. That was supposed to be great, but then they created Rocco and turned them into cartoon characters. And then by SummerSlam, they were gone. So to me, they would be much higher on the list if WWE would have just done more with them, if they would have had a better run. It's not all WWE's fault. Hawk had his issues, but when he first got there, I think they could have been huge, especially in 1990. So that's a shame that they never really got that cooking in WWE and they were gone. They wouldn't win the WCW. They only won the NWA tag titles once. They never won the WCW tag titles, to my knowledge. I think it was when they won the tag titles, they hadn't even changed over to WCW yet. So when they kind of returned there, I know Hawk went to Japan and Animal worked a little bit in WCW. Then they were both back together there, I think around 95 and 96. They were working Nitro matches on Nitro. But from what I remember, they did not win the titles. But they would come back to WWE in one of my favorite moments ever. In the Manhattan Center. It was the WWE Raw, the one that they had the ECW invasion on, and they went back to the Manhattan Center for the first time, you know, since they were there, you know, the first year. And it was a great moment when they just randomly showed up against the Headbangers. Around this time, I was calling hotlines and I was reading dirt sheets, but I had no idea that the Road Warriors are going to turn back up, and you hear that awesome music, and they come out to the ring and they lay waste to the Headbangers. And again, much like we saw in 91, much like we saw with the Steiners, WWE just drags their fucking feet. The tag division was ass in 1997. They should have walked right in the door and just been given the tag team titles. Whoever the champs were should have thrown the titles at them and ran away in fear. That's how just non-existent the tag title scene, I think, was around this time in 1997. So the fact that they came in, but they weren't booked to win the titles right away. They did a lot of stuff with the Nation of Domination, the great WrestleMania 13 match. They had a little bit of involvement in the Hart Foundation stuff as well. You know, in the Hart Foundation Canada-USA feud, they were in that 10-man tag, Canadian Stampede. But they didn't get a run or a real legitimate true shot at the titles until the end of 97. As a matter of fact, I think it was right after Brian Pillman died. It was the Raw taping after Bad Blood. Would have been a Tuesday. And they won. They beat the Godwins there. I think they even did a stip like, oh, if we don't win the titles, we'll retire, some shit like that. And they won the titles, but they only held them for a month. And I was in attendance. I was in the fourth row, Fayetteville, North Carolina, when the LOD lost their last tag team titles. I don't think they ever won championships again after this. And the Outlaws beat them. First run for the Outlaws, and I got to see that live. And I basically saw, with my own eyes, the end of the Road Warriors. A couple of weeks later, they would join with DX and beat the shit out of the Road Warriors, shave Hawk's mohawk. They would be repackaged as LOD 2000 with Sonny. They did the stupid drunk angle with Hawk. And that was a wrap on the tag team. Brought in Draws, resurrected in 05 with Heidenreich a little bit, but, you know, never the same. So I guess it never really occurred to me that I actually saw pretty much the demise of the Road Warriors in person. I saw one team get on the map and another team die that very same night. Two of the best ever, Outlaws and Road Warriors. So I would love to have LOD higher on the list. You know, they're both passed away now. They got a hell of a story. One of my favorite WWE DVDs, it's an old one now. I put it up here. It's right here. The Road Warriors DVD from, I don't know, 2004, 2005, whenever they made that DVD. It's a really good documentary for that time. You know, they were really good back then too, but compared to now, all the shit you see on the network and stuff is pretty good. That's a really good underrated documentary that's probably at least 15 years old now, but check it out. It's good, and it should give you a pretty good look into their insight. They spent a lot. They didn't phone it in. You know, some DVDs, it seems like they go through quickly. This one, they spent a lot of time on. I think it's like 2 hours long, and they really go into detail in their life and how they came up and shit like that. So it's worth a watch if you haven't seen it. So Legion of Doom comes in at number 7. Let me knock out some more super chats that were rolling in as I was talking before we get to number 6. How easy. There you are, man. Good to see you back. Thanks for the $5, Mr. Thunderdome. What do you think? So to push Lee, I think he should win the Rumble. Then MVP gets him to join Hurt Business and turn heel at Mania, become WWE champ. I'd be all for joining the Hurt Business. I'd be all for MVP recruiting him. Becoming WWE champ at WrestleMania seems like they got to do a lot in a short amount of time to make that happen. And I think now, at least I hope, I kind of think WWE might already have in their head what they want to do at WrestleMania, and I don't know if Keith Lee's involved in that or not. I think Keith Lee, a heel turn for him is coming. Joining the Hurt Business would be cool, but that would put him in an automatic kind of clash with Lashley in terms of who the alpha is in that group. That could create some problems, and plus I really want to see Lashley get a really good run here. I think maybe turning Lee heel, but maybe not joining the Hurt Business, just maybe having him turn heel might be better and be a contender for the title, but Keith Lee winning the title is not something I would ever reject, ever. I'm just not sure if WWE has it in their cards at the moment. We'll talk a lot about that on Monday, I'm sure. What's up, Spaz Phoenix? Appreciate the 5 and welcome back. Good to see you. Go sub Spaz's YouTube channel, by the way. Merry Christmas and the chat. Greg in the chat, I hope everyone's happy, healthy, and safe and sane. Festive, insert cheap plug here. Yeah, go shoot Spaz a subscription so you can listen to more wrestling stuff over there. He talks about everything and sometimes a lot more than I do. Good to see you back, Michael. Patreon supporter Michael Cuomo in the house, and thanks for the $5, man. Do you remember the Rujo Brothers? Of course. Originally beating the Hearts back in '87 for the belts, and the ref reversed the decision to DQ win for the Hearts. Yeah, I do. That was back when the Rujos were still babyface, prior to them turning heel. A lot of teams beat the Hearts back then. Rujos beat them in that deal. The Killer Bees beat him in a non-title match once with the masks on. They put the masks on and faked out the referee. And the Young Stallions even beat them in a non-title match. So yeah, tend to happen to the Hearts a lot, but that's what you had to do because they held the belts for a pretty good amount of time, 8-9 months, something like that. So they had a few matches like that. And I do remember the Rujos. I liked them. I was just a kid when they were babyfaces, and I liked them a lot. Love Ray Rougeau. I'm a mark for him. So thanks for 2 more, Spaz. Appreciate it. Best tag team of 2020, Killian Dane and Drake Maverick. They're not bad. I like them. For 2020, sure. I'll go with them. You can definitely tell that their alliance is getting stronger. Thanks for 5 more, Michael. Appreciate that a lot. By the way, Bulldog and Owen were the tag champs when LOT returned back in 1997. That's right, they were. They had, yeah, and who'd they beat? They beat like the Smoking Guns, and yeah, I think you had New Razor and Diesel. That was at the end of, yeah, that was the end of 96, but they were gone. The Godwins were still there, and I think you probably still had the Headbangers and some teams like that. So yeah, Bulldog and Owen were put together. I remember when they were put together, they had just won. They were just became the champs. I think at the end of 96 is when they put them together, and they won the belts. And I remember loving that because I was a big fan of the British Bulldogs. I'm like, hey, Owen's a pretty suitable substitution, I think, for Dynamite. And this makes a really good team. Plus, I love the Hart Foundation. And that was a great alliance for me. I love them together with Clarence Mason and everything. And Bulldog and Owen didn't make the list, but I really wanted them on there. I had them, but in the end, I bumped them. But yeah, Bulldog and Owen were great. Oh man, I should have put them. If I did put them on the list, I'd probably put them right here. Put them at number 6, and I wanted to include a modern team, and I love them a lot. And I'm going with the New Day at number 6. I feel like a modern team is needed here on this list because in terms of what tag team wrestling has been over the last 20 years, you know, they're going to be one of the only teams, along with the Usos, who I would really like to put on this list as well, but did not. They're one of those teams that you're definitely going to remember, at least from this time period, being a dominant tag team. You know, their tag team title runs compared to other teams, it's different now. You know, the belts are passed. You have 2 sets of belts, sometimes even 3, and they're passed around like, you know, candy to everybody. So the fact that they've had either 10 or 11 runs, I don't know how many it is, even though they've had that many, it's not like something that I really considered, you know, is good criteria because the business now is so fucking ridiculous. But what I will always remember about them is just how great they were and how consistently great they were and how consistently over they were. You know, it took them a while. We remember when they were put together, 3 guys that all had potential, but WWE didn't know what to do with. They put them together and they ran the vignettes, and what looked to be early New Day would not be what modern day New Day is now. It kind of had a completely different idea and feel to it at the time. And we remember when they debuted, they weren't getting over. The fans didn't give a shit. What's wrong with the New Day? Why aren't they connecting? What's not right here? You know, and then they kind of turned heel, kind of had an attitude. And that's when, just like Edge and Christian, you know, once they made that turn, they were able to really play a little bit. I think it helped them to make that heel turn and become those heels, because that really now opened up the door for a whole lot more stuff they can do. They're not limited anymore. They can do and say whatever they want. And that's when individually you can start seeing their charisma coming out, especially with Xavier Woods and really especially with Big E. And you can kind of see, you know, that he's a character under there, you know, if WWE were to let him get out. And then, of course, Kofi, the veteran in the group, who's always been entertaining, has always been able to speak, and has always been a fun-loving, positive guy that's entertaining. They're all on a really equal level. They're almost like equally over with the crowd. All of them. Not one of them is really any super over than the other. Maybe you can make the case for Big E in recent times because he does stand out a bit and he's the bigger one of the 3, you know, but Kofi was the one that got the world title, you know, a couple of years ago. So in terms of their longevity, especially today, you know, you don't see a whole lot of longevity. How many trios do you say staying together for, what has it been, 7 years or whatever, however fucking long it's been now, 6 years, something like that. They've been together for a long time, and that's not something you see in modern times, the way WWE splits teams up before they've even finished aligning with each other, you know, before they've even really developed a team name. WWE's already got an angle to split them up. You know, could you imagine the Shield together this long and shit? No, you know, WWE, it's just not what they do. So even when they did kind of have Kofi going off on his own, the New Day stayed intact. And everybody thought, oh, at some point somebody's going to turn, and is Xavier and Big E going to get jealous of Kofi and turn on him? And I love that they've refrained as long as they could from doing that and not pulling the trigger on a split, not pulling the trigger on a heel turn, when normally not only would they pull the trigger on it, they would hot shot it, and they would do it way before they needed to do it. So the fact that they've showed restraint here and they've allowed this faction to grow its legacy and really, I think, make a niche in modern times and really set their place, you know, in the 2010s as a team and a trio and 3 guys that you're always going to remember. To me, I appreciate that because it's really hard for me to find anything that I really, really love in modern times because it's so much fucking nonsense. But the New Day, aside from a few times throughout the years, that because they are on TV every week, you know, every week they're on TV. They've hosted WrestleMania. They even if they're not wrestling, they're in the ring doing something entertaining. So there have been periods during their runs where I think some fans have said, oh, they're getting a little bit old, kind of getting a little tired of their shtick or whatever, you know, but that's just because they haven't broken up and they're just on TV and they haven't really changed their personalities a lot. They've just gotten more over the top and more fun loving. And, you know, so not everything is a home run. You know, I'm not a big fan of the New Day backstage making pancakes with Otis. I don't need to see that, but in terms of what they can do in the ring, how exciting their matches are great. The feud they had with the Usos, the Hell in the Cell match, and how many great matches they've been capable of having, dating all the way back to, did they work with the Shield at all or no? Can't remember, but man, they had just had maybe the Wyatt family. Yeah, Wyatt family and shit like that. They just had amazing matches. You can always count on their matches being great, especially if it's on pay-per-view. Any pay-per-view match the New Day was ever involved in, whether it be for the tag titles or whatever, was always fantastic. They've had pre-show matches that were considered the best match on the pay-per-view. That's how good this team is. And Xavier, I always thought, was just loaded with charisma, and I thought this was a perfect place for him because I wasn't sure if he'd really be able to get over and stand out on his own in singles based on how big your roster is and how big physically somebody like he is. But he's a great guy. He's a smart guy. He's got his Twitch deal on the side. They've done a lot for the Black Lives Matter movement, which is extremely important to me, and I love that they've really spoken out, and WWE has given them a reason to do that. And they're all great guys with great attitudes that deserve every single bit of the success they've had, if not more. So from that aspect, and just when I see them, I always smile. I'm never disappointed to see the New Day, no matter what they're doing. They're three of my favorite people in the company, and that's why I've included them in the list. Over other teams that aren't on this list, is because how much I really, really like them. And that's what this is about. It's about my favorite ones, not the ones that I consider are the best. That's a question for you guys, though. If you were going to make a top 10 greatest tag teams of all time, would you include New Day on the list? I'm not 100% sure if I'd include New Day on mine. I'd have to really think about it. I'm probably going to say no, but 10-time tag team champions, you can't just, shy that away either. So that might be tough. I might not put them on the top 10 best. If I was going to make a video of who I think the best in history are, they might not make it. But in terms of my favorite, they are there. They are awesome. And I love me some New Day. Now to number 5. Actually, let me see if I need to knock out a super chat. I'm going to knock out super chats in between my numbers here. Oh, there's only one. That's good. Another one from Spaz. Appreciate the 5, Spaz. With the women of NXT being such a jewel in the WWE crown, could we see a women's tag team tournament, bring real teams, give Focus call in the Dusty May? Call it the Dusty May. I'd love that. That is a fantastic idea. You just got to hope that Triple H, he can make that happen without them fucking that up. Putting teams together and real teams, giving them Focus and all that. WWE, they can't get out of their own way. They're too antsy. They got too many ants in their pants. So if they get too many teams out there, they're going to be thinking, oh, how can we split them up and fuck them up and stuff? So if they actually just kept teams and actually had a division where these teams challenged and competed for titles, yes, I'm all on board with that. I don't think WWE's main roster creative team could handle something like that, but maybe NXT could. Totally fine with that. I'm into it. I say do it. DA30, thanks for the $2. 2015 and 16 was the New Day's best years. Yeah, I agree totally. And thank you for $2 to Sean. The New Day even inducted the Fabulous Freebirds. Exactly, because they were one of the more famous, 3-man units. And I kind of forgot about that. That's awesome that they did that because, in terms of trios, now if you're doing a trios top 10, shit, New Day's number 1 or 2, if you ask me. And I was never even a big Freebirds fan. You're not going to see those motherfuckers on this list either, but you will see them in the honorable mentions. Number five, some people might consider an exception, but I don't. At the beginning of the podcast, I told you guys that I was going to be excluding teams that consisted of big stars. No Brothers of Destruction, no 2-man power trip, no mega powers, no 2 big world champions coming together to win titles. Austin Taker, Rock Taker, Cena, Shawn Triple H, shit like that. Those teams are ineligible. But considering this team, I believe is a 7-time WCW Tag Team Champion, I got to include Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, the Outsiders, because I loved the Outsiders. Nash was already, Diesel in WWE, already world champ for a year. Razor Ramon was a well-established semi-main eventer, 4-time Intercontinental Champion. Both of these guys were megastars and 2 of the top 5 WWE had when they jumped to WCW. So we kind of thought they were going to go there to be single stars, but they kind of made them the Outsiders. And the way they came in, and I was a WWE fan. I did not like WCW, and I was devastated that Nash and Hall jumped. But when I saw them come in and the way they were presented as outsiders and they wanted to take down WCW, I'd enjoyed it. I enjoyed watching them smack around WCW guys. I enjoyed them, attacking WCW guys, and they were so cool and funny about it. They had an industry-changing run in WCW. That's why they belong on this list, because without them going over there, we wouldn't have evolved in the Attitude Era. That would have never happened. Austin might have not even gotten on the map had, the clique remained intact in WWE. So them jumping over there, it was such a huge moment for the business. You didn't know it at the time, but years later you look back and like, damn, if they wouldn't have gone over there, the business would look completely different than it did today. And they went there and they won the tag team titles 7 times, maybe 6. I can't remember what the official stat there is, but they won the titles a lot, and they were an actual team with a team name, with the team name on their tights and everything. So they were singles. Scott had U.S. title runs. Nash had world title runs, but they were still the outsiders through all that and would win the titles through 96, 97, 98, and 99. I think they had runs in every year, and they would work with some of the best teams in WCW, like the Steiners, like Harlem Heat. I think they won the titles from both of them at some point. So they were a tag, and the Four Horsemen for that matter. They were a tag team, and they were a unit, and they were working together to win titles. So that's why I'm including them on this list. Even though they technically are 2 major stars put together, they had an actual team where some of those other alliances maybe did not. Maybe Brothers of Destruction I should have included, but they didn't make my list either. But the Outsiders, like I said, the main reason they're here is because, number one, the amount of titles they won, some of the teams they beat, how dominant they were, but how they changed the business. Coming in, the NWO, the alliance with Hogan, and even prior to that, sitting in the audience as WWE guys and, beating up WCW's top teams. I remember the first time they won the tag titles, I was so happy when they won them. I'm like, yes, they just, they're going to come in here and dominate. And plus, they, like I said, they were part of that change in the business where it kind of started reaching a more adult audience, that 18 to 34, or 18 to 49 now, that very, very precious demo. But back then, I think it was more like the 18 to 34 range. The people in their mid-20s, the people in college, like me, could really relate to teams like this that were a little bit more normal, weren't so cartoony. And Nash is just oozing, no disrespect, Razor Ramon, so much charisma, still does to this day. He's just a hilariously funny guy. And, he's just kind of laid back and cool. And that persona kind of came out in his TV performances as well, where he was just a little bit cooler and more laid back. He didn't cut that typical, let me tell you something, promo brother. He'd be cutting the promo like, that outfit looks stupid on you. Shit like that. You just didn't hear a lot of wrestlers say. They were acting more like regular people, I suppose, is what you could say. And they were hilarious. Some of the shit they would do with the popcorn in the front row and the ticket and, Nash pretending to smoke and, things like that. Just little things that they did were just so fun and so fun to watch. And even though I was firmly on the side of the WWE in the Monday Night Wars, my God, did I love that team. They were so fun. Even as heels, I was on the NWO side. I was on their side. I wanted them to destroy WCW. I didn't like Sting and those guys. I wanted Nash and Hall and X-Pac or Six and those guys to win out, because Nash and Hall were 2 of my favorite guys in WWE. Didn't want to see them leave. So they were entertaining every time they were together. Even when they split up, they split up. They did the drunk angle with Hall. They had the little feud, and they came back together to win the titles again. So, their runs were, not just concentrated in one spot. What happened in between feuds and shit too. They would come back together and reunite and win them in 99 and shit. So that's why they make the list, is because they did have longevity. Technically they were together longer than Edge and Christian, really. So they are the one exception of 2 big stars put together, because I felt like they were a team and a really fun one. And WCW has a lot of teams on this list. That's my 3rd WCW team so far, right? Hollywood Blondes, Steiners, and Road Warriors technically, and now the Outsiders. So yeah. Natural Disasters. I remember, Natural Disasters and Money Inc. are not on my top 10. Neither one of those are actually even in my honorable mentions. Hate to disappoint you. I like those teams. I thought Rotundo and DiBiase was a great team. I thought their gimmick was a little hokey, but together you can't get 2 better just fucking ring generals like that. Those guys are awesome. They would have made a good team back in the 80s. I know Rotundo was teaming with Wyndham, but had 1985 Ted DiBiase, been there around that time, he would have made a very suitable replacement, maybe even a better one than Wyndham for Rotundo. They would have made a great team regardless of what era they were in. If they were in the mid-'80s, they would have been taken a little bit more seriously. Ted would have just been Ted. Mike would have just been Mike. But years later, they were all, moneyed up and all that with Jimmy Hart. So they were great, but again, not on my super top 10. Neither are the Smoking Guns. Merry Christmas, Melissa. And no Doom either, John. I like Doom, but again, we're talking about my favorites here, and even though they were great, not my favorites. Number 4, the Hardy Boys. Matt Hardy, not Matt Riddle, and Jeff Hardy. These guys were fabulous. They were together all the way up until just a couple of years ago, returning at WrestleMania to one of the biggest pops WrestleMania's ever had. that right there might put that pop alone might put them so high up on my list based on, they've been together for 20 years and had such a long run in and out of the company, doing various things, personal problems, demons, runs in TNA and shit like that, and always coming back together. And of course, how they got started. They're local boys. I'm from Eastern North Carolina. I used to see these fuckers around. So they would work a lot of the independent shows, in the Greenville area and stuff, and sometimes just be in town randomly when they were super young, and they would work TVs. Jeff famously worked against Razor Ramon when he was 16 because he lied about his age. So they had their foot in the door really, really early in WWE, used as jobbers, and then you would start to see them later on in the mid to late 90s as a tag team jobbers. They started dressing, kind of how you see the Young Bucks dress now, and they started wearing that gear, but they were still super jobbers, super small, getting their fucking ass kicked for years. Until I guess they got signed. They got a little bit bigger. They grew with experience. And then you fast forward to, I guess, around 99. I was at WrestleMania 15. And even though that was one of the worst WrestleManias of all time, I remember being there and watching the tag team battle royal or some shit they had. I think it was a battle royal. If I remember right, the battle royal, the winners went on to face, I think, Owen and Jeff for the titles. Can't remember. I was there and I can't remember. And I remember seeing the Hardy Boys in there. And at that time, you'd only seen them kind of on TV as jobbers and stuff. And I'm like, damn. The Hardy Boys are inside of a ring at WrestleMania. And my first thought was that they were going to win that battle royal. I can't remember who did. Was it D'Lo and somebody, right? Help me out. But I remember when I saw the Hardy Boys in there, I was way up, but you can't miss those neon fucking green tights they have or whatever they were wearing. I was way up in the upper deck, but I could see them down there. And I'm like, I think the Hardy Boys are going to win. I think this is going to be WWE's way of introducing them. I've seen them on TV for years. I knew who they were. They lived in my area. And I'm like, holy shit, they might have gotten signed and they might actually get a shot at the titles here, because who else are they going to give the titles to? We already have a makeshift thrown together team as it is with Owen and Jarrett. They were kind of put together too. And the Outlaws were split up around this time and stuff. And so Edge and Christian weren't together yet. Or Edge and Christian were. I forgot what the fuck they did at this pay-per-view. Oh, they were in the ministry. They didn't even wrestle. They came down from the top and helped The Undertaker murder the Big Boss Man. So they didn't even have a match on the show. So I kind of just, based on who was in the ring, I was like, shit, maybe it was going to be the Hardys. I actually thought it was going to be them, but it wasn't. But they did, I guess, around that time actually get signed, and then they paired them with Michael Hayes, changed up their look. That's when they started wearing the shit you're seeing now, with the dark jeans and all the crazy shit and the colored hair and stuff. And Hayes was with them, and I remember when Michael would dress like them. He would wear that shit, try to wear those jeans that the kids wore back then. It just did not look good on a 55-year-old man, or however old he was at the time. And he didn't really fit, but I thought he was a really good person to put with them based on who he was in the company, how good he is at his job, and the information and experience he can pass along to them. It was probably good for them professionally, but from a fan's perspective, I didn't think the alliance really fit. I didn't care about it, but I was able to be there and see the Hardy Boys with Michael Hayes win their very first tag team titles ever in Fayetteville. I believe it was a Raw taping. I was there, like after Fully Loaded or something. I don't remember what, or maybe after King of the Ring, something like that. And they beat, I think, the APA. And I was like, I got to see the Hardys and the Outlaws both win their first ever tag team titles in the same building. But this one happened to be the Hardys' hometown. They were right there from that Fayetteville area. They had a lot of family and friends in the crowd. Me and Daniel used to see his dad walking around. He talked to us one time. We were sitting on the floor, and he was just walking around talking to people, and people who knew him knew who he was. He was a Hardy Boys dad. He was just hanging out with the fans and shit. So it was a big deal for them because it happened there. But they weren't ready for that yet. That was prior to the No Mercy match that I talked about a little while ago. They hadn't even had that thing yet with Edge and Christian and really gotten over and gotten that respect from the fans. WWE gave them an early run, didn't last long. They dropped them, and then they would, wind up getting back on track later on. So once they dumped Michael Hayes, and then it became a battle for Terry Runnels. I can't remember exactly how that came about, but then they went into that No Mercy match that we talked about earlier on with Edge and Christian. Had the great response from the fans, show respect the next night. And for me, when things really changed for the Hardys, by then I was already pretty amazed. I'm like, holy shit. Fucking little Matt and Jeff from Eastern North Carolina, is now like not jobbers. And it's crazy enough to see them on TV as jobbers, but now to see them on TV and win, and now they're winning titles, and now they're winning pay-per-view matches. And they won that one in No Mercy, actually. It was one of the only matches Edge and Christian lost. They lost that first one, won every single one after that, which was kind of funny. But where I really knew the Hardys were here to stay was at the Royal Rumble 2000. They had like a tables match with the Dudleys, and one of my favorite visuals ever of the Hardy Boys. It wasn't even one of Jeff's more spectacular bumps, but it just looked cool. It was at the Garden, and they had that set. You know how they have their entrance ramp kind of close to the ring? It's different at the Garden, and they had that like taxi cab over top. And I think they were on the opposite side. Can't remember if they on the taxi cab side or the other side, but they were basically on that entrance ramp, had a table set up in the aisleway there. Bubba's on top, and Jeff, the camera's got is behind Jeff, and he's right before he's doing the Swanton bomb, and he does the thing, and you see the sea of people, over his shoulder, and he dives and lands on Bubba or whoever for the win, because it was a tables match, and that was the last guy they needed to put through the table to get the victory, and they beat the fucking Dudley Boys, a hardcore team with ECW experience and an ECW run. Guys have been, who've had cheese graters raked across their head and been through some gnarly shit. The Hardy Boys, little Matt and Jeff, just beat these big guys in a fucking tables match. And to me, I was like, wow, the Hardys really are here to stay. They are over like Rover now. They are exciting. They are fun. And even though that they're small, they're credible because they can do so many crazy things. Jeff is fearless and he'll climb up to anything to dive off of it and put his whole body on the line, his career on the line, for the match and shit like that. So that's when I knew. I was like, oh, the Hardy Boys are a big deal. That was one of my favorite matches they've ever had. I just thought it was so good, again, for the time. Looking at it 20 years later, maybe a modern fan won't think it's that crazy of a match. But for me, that Royal Rumble 2000 match against the Dudleys was fantastic. So that was when I realized that the Hardys were, that to me, that was even bigger than the No Mercy match for some reason. I don't know why, but that Royal Rumble match to me put them on the map, and at least in terms of, how I felt about them. They never had a bad match. Every time they were going out there, it was swantons and twists of fates and poetry and motions. They were so smooth. They were so good. They worked so well together, had such good continuity, and they were a great team. And they were legit brothers for once. Edge and Christian weren't. And it was fun to see, and Taker and Kane aren't and shit. So, they were legit brothers. Grew up wrestling in their backyard on their trampoline, self-taught, self-trained, made it all the way through jobber status, lying about your age status, tag team jobber status, into slowly being pushed and then getting over on your own with the crowd once you're allowed to go out there and do your stuff. Once they say, go out there, you and the Dudleys, 15 minutes, do whatever the fuck you want. They had their chance, and they proved to everybody they were awesome. And then after that, they went on to win God knows how many WWE tag team titles with all the great matches they had, those TLC matches that they performed like crazy, especially Jeff. And I've talked about that. I was there at SummerSlam 2000 to watch him dive off the thing. Matt took a gnarly bump that I could actually feel under my feet. I've talked about that before. When he hit the ground, I don't know how many feet away from the ring. I was really close, though. I felt it. I could feel the ground shake from Matt landing through the ladder, through a table, onto the ground. And you added Lita to the mix there, which added a lot to them as well. The Team Extreme, I thought the three of them made an excellent trio. Great presentation, great music. Matches were exciting. And, of course, their story, like I said, how they got to that point is one of the best wrestling's ever seen. And even to this day, you look at what they went through. They both had the serious problems. Jeff arguably still is battling these demons to this day. But both of them could easily be dead right now. And not only are they not, they came back together to win the titles at WrestleMania 33 in 2017 to one of the biggest WrestleMania pops in history. And that's a success story, because there was a time there when Jeff, he left, in 2009, and then his house burned down and he got arrested with all those drugs, and he was facing some serious charges there, and then Matt a couple years later, same thing, multiple DWIs. He has that one mugshot where he looks like one eye is all the way down here by his lip. He's just a mess, and I can't believe neither one of these guys, passed away of an overdose or, car accident or anything like that. And they kind of pulled their lives together. Matt really seems like he's got a firm grasp on life. Rebby has really kept him in line. 3 kids they have now, great family. Jeff as well, but Jeff, still arguably struggles. And hopefully his problems are finally over as well. And the brothers can, appreciate the careers that they had, because it was an awesome one. So, to me, I look at them as a pretty big success, and especially being able to overcome some of their, personal issues and addiction problems and some of their weaknesses to overcome that, come out on the other side of it, to me is a happy ending. So Hardy Boys are number 4 on my countdown. The Bushwhackers, I'd love to talk about the Whackers, but I can't. I wasn't a fan. Maybe the Sheepherders, but not the Bushwhackers. They were silly. All right, number 3. So my top 3 here are probably not going to be too surprising to many of you. I think for those of you who've been listening to me throughout the years know who my top 3 probably is. But we're going to start with number 3, the British Bulldogs. The reason they're on this list is because they were the champions when I was really getting hard into wrestling. I was already watching it, and I already liked it. All the way back probably 82-ish is, when I really started becoming a fan and stuff. But by the time we got to 86, I was full blown. I loved wrestling. I was glued to the TV every time it was on. And the Bulldogs were champs around this time. Now, they came in. Everybody knows their story. They were from England. and they worked a lot in Canada, in Calgary, and Dynamite. Some of the best matches I've ever seen in my life to this day are Dynamite Kid and Bret Hart from Stampede Wrestling, when they were both just two skinny 170-pound kids. I cannot believe how Benoit, Dynamite, really bulked up during his WWE run prior to him getting there, and he got really big, but he was still every bit as good a worker as he was, just kind of worked a little bit different of a style, a lot like Chris Benoit would work. But when he was lighter like that, and some of the light heavyweight matches he would have in WWE too, prior to forming British Bulldogs against like Tiger Mask and shit, he was just a phenomenal worker. So, they brought him and Davey in, who, of course, is jacked, and they put them together, and they were just a badass ass-kicking team. Like I said earlier when we were talking about the Steiner brothers, I would have loved to see prime Steiners and prime Bulldogs, in the ring. I was never really a big fan of Dynamite personally, all the horror stories we heard about him, and he's recently passed away in the last couple of years as well. And some of the things he did and the people he bullied and the way he acted backstage and stuff isn't some of the greatest stories ever, but in terms of a team, I loved them, and they had a hell of a run. They won the tag belts at WrestleMania 2, beating the Dream Team. They had Captain Lou with them, and Ozzy Osbourne was involved in that, and they finally won the belts and held them for a long time, about a year. They may have not even dropped them had Dynamite not gotten injured. But one of my favorite feuds that they had, obviously, is with the Hart Foundation. I watched all of that stuff. They had so many matches together before either team even won the belts. I remember even before the Bulldogs won the titles, they were having great TV matches with the Hart Foundation. They all knew each other very well. They all came from the same place, but as a fan, you really didn't know that. You just knew they were having kick-ass matches. And that was prior to even the Bulldogs winning the title. And they would go on to feud for the titles after that. So the Bulldogs won, and then you fast forward all the way to early 97, right before WrestleMania 3. And that's when Dynamite had the neck injury, and they had to take him off TV, and he had to get surgery and all that. So they did the title change on television on Superstars, and I watched this as a kid. I was sitting right there on the couch, and I was fucking mortified. I was horrified. I loved the Hart Foundation. Even as heels, I liked the Hart Foundation, but I really liked the British Bulldogs. And I remember Dynamite got hit, with the megaphone on the outside because he didn't work at all in the match. They had to, kind of get him out of that deal. They would do a similar deal with the Rockers at SummerSlam 1990 when Shawn was hurt. But Dynamite went down. Bulldog had to work the match by himself, and you had that evil fucking referee Danny Davis in there, and the Harts were able to finally overcome Davey. Numbers game caught up to him, and then of course Danny Davis with the fast count, and the Hart Foundation win the tag team titles right there on Superstars. And I remember being kind of pissed, and plus I hated Danny Davis. He was one heel that I really bought into. I fucking hated him because he already screwed over Tito Santana, and now the Bulldogs. So I was pissed. The WrestleMania 3 match was fun. I was there for that, but I also was a little bummed out it wasn't for the titles. I thought for sure it'd be Harts and Bulldogs for the titles. Instead, they made it a 6-man. That way they didn't have to take the belts off the Harts or beat them or anything like that, and they added Davis and Tito Santana, and the Harts won that. To make it more interesting, they should have made it a handicap match maybe and put the belts on the line like they would do at WrestleMania 5 with Fuji and Powers of Pain. But that was all a lot of fun. Their run with the Harts, 86 and 87, was so good, and those matches were so good. And sometimes they'd just be random matches on TV. Primetime wrestling, I can remember them wrestling at least twice, like in 86. Just good, dark, televised or recorded matches that they would play for those shows, and they were always just really good. A lot of good spots in that. You could see, some of Brett and Davey's spots that they would go on to use their whole career, them working those out in a lot of these early matches. Really fun when you watch Brett kind of perfect the backbreaker and the Russian leg sweep, and Davey perfect the monkey flip and all the shit that he did, and the kip up and and all that stuff that he used to kind of like to do. So watching them back in those days is like really fun, and I invite you to go back and watch some of those matches. They were fantastic. It was even before the Bulldogs were wearing the Union Jack on their ass. It was just like a cursive writing British Bulldogs on their tights, and Hart Foundation of course was wearing pink, and that was very unique as well. But I think I would have liked to see, when I think about the Bulldogs and how awesome they were, I think another reason why I like them so much is because I like to envision them facing teams that weren't in their era. Like I would have liked to see these very same Bulldogs around 5 years prior when the Samoans were there, and Johnson and Rocky Johnson, Tony Atlas, and teams like that. That would have been really fun, and then later on facing the Steiners, facing the Road Warriors. Holy shit. They did face Demolition, but if they had some Road Warrior matches, that would have been great. I guess Davey kind of faced Demolition. I know Davey and Owen, or not Road Warriors. Davey and Owen faced LOD, I think. But it would have been great to see them have matches with guys like that. And then, today, there's all sorts of teams they could work with, So Bulldogs were the best. I really liked them a lot, especially Davey Boy. And of course, Dynamite was regarded as one of the best workers ever. Chris Benoit patterned his entire career after Dynamite, so much so that not only did he pattern himself after him, he became a carbon copy. He's the same size, height, width, weight, wheelbase. I'm quoting my cousin Vinny. But no, he's seriously like the same size, the same weight. They have the same length arms. Their muscles are even positioned in the same place. They work the same in the ring. The snap suplexes, the headbutts, the strikes, the kicks, the punches, all that stuff is so identical. It's freaky. So if you've never seen, if you're familiar with Benoit but not familiar with Dynamite, just go watch Dynamite, from like around 84 to 86. And tell me you don't see Benoit in the fucking mirror. They were a great team. Loved the British Bulldogs. Rest in peace to both of them. Number 2, big drum roll. I think you guys probably know who it is. Demolition. I loved this team. Even though many people consider them to be Road Warrior ripoffs, I don't. I thought they blazed their own trail. I think they were intended to be Vince's answer to the Road Warriors, but turned into their own team. Definitely intended to be that, because we've heard stories that Vince always really wanted the Road Warriors. For whatever reason, he couldn't get them, so he decided to create a team that was similar to them. Now, I didn't really pay much attention to Demolition until they found their niche, much like, Undertaker with Brother Love. Once he found Paul Bearer, then it felt like it started coming together. Same thing with Demolition. It took until they got with Fuji for me to care, because at first it wasn't, Darso wasn't even there. They were managed by Johnny Valiant. Luscious Johnny was their manager, and it was Randy Colley, who was Moondog Rex. He played Smash along with Bill Eadie. So they were wearing kind of a different type of garb. They were around in like early '87. They were around at WrestleMania 3. They weren't on the card, but they were wrestling matches on TV by that point. And they were wearing these big gray furry boots, and they almost looked like a combination of, dominatrix and Viking outfitter. So it just didn't look right. And then they had the face paint, of course. So, they were a work in progress. That was just kind of that was the beginning of it. Barry Darso was brought in to replace Rex, and then Mr. Fuji was replaced Johnny V, and then the team really felt real. And then almost instantaneously, you could feel they were going to go right to the titles, and that would have been around '87. And another one of my favorite teams that I really wanted to put on this list, I just couldn't bring myself to it. I'm going to talk about them in a minute in the honorable mentions, was Strikeforce. I know they're kind of some people poke fun at Strikeforce, but man, Rick Martel and Tito Santana, they should have been a much more dominant team than they were. They could have stayed together and had a run similar to the Bulldogs or similar to Steiner Brothers or something like that. They were two really good wrestlers who have had singles gold. Rick Martel was AWA champion. Tito had been IC champ twice. They were credible, good wrestlers, and they had a good look, and they looked good together. And they were champs at that time. And I remember Jesse on TV, when they were kind of building up to that match at WrestleMania 4, he's like, Strikeforce is going to get murdered. They're too tiny. They're too small. They're little, which just cracks me up. I mean, Tito and Martel are like 250 each, 240 each, something like that. And he's like, they're too small for Demolition, and they're just going to eat them up and spit them out. So I watched that. That was the very first pay-per-view I ever ordered, was WrestleMania 4 in 1988, because pay-per-view really wasn't available in my area until that time. And that was the first pay-per-view I ever watched. And I knew as a kid, I was only 12. I knew that Demolition was going to beat Strikeforce. I knew it. Strikeforce, of course, beat the Hearts. I was a little bit pissed at them for that, because I liked the Hart Foundation by that point when they dropped the titles to them. But heading into WrestleMania, the writing was on the wall 100%. You could see that it was going to be Demolition. It was. They did have to cheat to win a little bit with Fuji's cane and everything, but they won the titles and became a pretty dominant, scary, believable heel tag team as champions. Now, another reason why Demolition is on this list is because they had such an they're so high on this list is because they had such an interesting run, and they had a good look. Once they fell into that niche and they got the face paint down, like what you see here on Axe and Smash, that was kind of like their standard face paint. Once Smash started putting that cool shit on, just like the Road Warriors in their early days, their makeup evolved. And with Demolition, it was the same thing. Their makeup evolved into something that I really, really liked and I thought was really, really cool, especially when Smash started growing his hair out a little bit. I just really liked the team, and I liked their presentation, and the music was badass. It was on the Pile Driver album. I have it. I think it was Rick Derringer that did the Demolition theme song, but it was awesome. It was a hard rockin', heavy metal type of song. It sounded great. Still holds up. I mean, it's kind of a timeless song. It's not that bad to this day. You listen to the Demolition song, you can rock out to that shit. So the whole presentation I thought was great, and every bit as good as the Road Warriors. I mean, well, maybe not every bit as good, but close. And you knew that as a kid. You thought about them like, yeah, that's like WWE's version of the Road Warriors, and what's going to happen if they ever, cross paths. And of course, we talked about that later on. But what was really cool about Demolition too was they're another one of these rare cases of a team, a wrestler or wrestlers in the middle of a long heel run title run who turns, babyface, during the run. So the Survivor Series match later on in 88, months and months later after they won the titles, because they held the titles for a long time, that match really sticks out to me because of the double turn. I've told the story a million times. The big 20-man tag, Powers of Pain on the captaining the baby faces, Demolition captaining the heels. It kind of comes down to them at the end, and Mr. Fuji turns on Demolition and joins up with the Powers of Pain. And I remember as a kid not quite understanding. I remember thinking that Mr. Fuji turned babyface. I was thinking that the Powers of Pain were still babyface and Fuji joined them and Demolition was still heels, but it was actually a double turn, and that's something that was really rare at that time and something that they did in 1988 I thought was cool, and they turned Demolition babyface in the middle of their title run to feud with now a heel Powers of Pain that I believe would result in many matches and culminate at WrestleMania 5 in the handicap match when Fuji would join Powers of Pain against Demolition for the titles, and Demolition beat them. So, they had held the titles all this time. So now they've been champions for a year, and they'd go on to hold the titles for even longer than that. And I remember I was so fucking mad. I remember I was so mad at the Saturday Night's main event match. I watched that against Tully and Arn. Tully and Arn came in as the Brain Busters, started gaining momentum, and they were given a tag team title shot on Saturday Night's main event, which I believe was a 2 out of 3 falls match. And I had something in the pit of my stomach, because I knew, Demolition was ripe. They had a long run. Tully and Arn were new. Bobby was their manager. And I kind of felt it. I kind of felt like it might happen. It was a 2 out of 3 falls, and Andre got involved, threw a chair into the ring, and they whacked, I think, Smash with it, and was able to win the third fall and win the tag team championships. And I'm like, fuck, I was so upset. I mean, Tully and Arn were a great team. As you can see here, they're not on my top 10 favorite because at the time, Tully and Arn weren't my favorite. And I'm going to talk about that here in the honorable mentions. A lot of these teams, if I'm talking about my favorite teams, at the time, I didn't like them. As an adult, you grow to appreciate them and love their work. You go back and watch their matches. I'm like, man, Tully and Arn and the Rock and Roll and the Midnight were good. But for a 13-year-old kid, they weren't my favorite, So that's why, teams like Demolition or teams like that aren't on a list like this. So, Tully and Arn, as great as they were and as legendary as they were, I was pissed that they won the titles from Demolition. But luckily, it wouldn't last too long because on TV, another match that I saw live, I actually saw every single one of Demolition's title victories and title losses as they happened live. As they aired, I should say. Some of them live, some of them aired. But never once missed anything. So I have a really vivid memory of a lot of these matches, a lot of these memories, and how, and how the angles and stuff played out. So when they won the titles back, I can't remember if it was Superstars or Challenge. Part of me wants to think it was Challenge, but I'm not sure. But they beat the Brainbusters just on TV, won the belts back, which surprised the hell out of me. And then Bobby Heenan was pissed. A few weeks later on the Brother Love show, he's so mad that Tully and Arn dropped the belts to Demolition. And I know Tully had got fired and Tully and Arn were gone after that. But he was so mad. He goes, I'm going to get these belts back, and here's how I'm going to do it. Haku and Andre the Giant. And I remember the line he delivered on the Brother Love show. He said, there's no way I can't lose. And he was right. And they didn't. They won the belts on TV. So another TV title loss here. So they lost the belts on, I think, Superstars and Saturday Night's Main Event throughout their careers. And they wound up losing to the Colossal Connection, but then getting a rematch at WrestleMania 6 and another one of my favorite tag team matches of all time. Even though the match in the ring wasn't great, Andre never even got in the ring. Demolition regained the titles in front of 70,000 people at Skydome at WrestleMania 6 to one of the best pops. I mean, I popped so loud in my living room. I ordered that pay-per-view. I was watching it live, watching Axe and Smash hug there, holding up the titles, the fans going ape shit. And right after that, they even redesigned the tag team titles to give them a fresh gold look. That was the end. That night was the end of the silver tag team titles. After that, Demolition would be on TV with, big gold belts, and they would also add Crush. And that began the downfall, of course. We talked about that earlier on with the Legion of Doom stuff. And they would add Crush because Bill Eadie was on his way out. And then they would head into SummerSlam to be challenged by the Hart Foundation. And I made the case that, as much as I love this match, LOD probably should have been the team to get that match. And it turned out to be the Hearts instead, and it turned out to be my favorite tag team match of all time. Yes, because I'm biased towards the Hearts and Demolition, but also because I thought it was a really good match. 2 out of 3 falls, great atmosphere in Philadelphia. Road Warriors getting involved in the end. The pop after the pin when Bret Hart pinned Crush was like nothing I've ever seen. It was such a great moment. The big post-match celebration backstage with Hawk, Animal, Bret, and Jim was one of my favorite backstage promos of all time. So many great memories there, and Demolition was a part of that in a losing effort. And then, of course, they would go on then to face, the LOD in that feud that really kind of fell flat. But their run was incredible. I liked them as heels, liked them as baby faces, thought they had a great presentation. They were good in the ring. Arguably, they were better in the ring than Hawk and Animal. Maybe not Hawk. Hawk was really good, but Darso was a good wrestler, great hand. So was Bill Eadie. So maybe I'll say they weren't better, but they were as good. As good in the ring in terms of being able to have good matches and stuff. They were every bit as good as the Road Warriors, and maybe you could make a case they were better. But overall, they were just a great team. And in terms of WWE, I just love them and have a ton of memories of them. So Demolition comes in at number 2. That leaves us at number 1, which I know you guys are probably going to know who that is. But before we do that, let's talk about the honorable mentions. Like I said, there's a lot of teams missing from this list. Some of you guys are, throwing out team names, Strike Force and teams like that. And trust me, I wanted to put a lot on here. But it's a top 10, not a top 20. If it was a top 20, all these teams would be included. And also it was WWE and WCW. So if it would have been AWA, I would have put Stevens and Patterson on this list. One of my favorite tag teams from the old days. One of my favorite tag teams to go back and watch now as an adult was Ray Stevens and Pat Patterson. Also, the Usos. I debated, should I put the Usos or New Day on the list? Because the Usos have been a team far longer. They've been in the company now a decade, as a team. I mean, up until recently with Jay kind of going on his own because of Jimmy's injury. But they've been around a long time, and they've created themselves a hell of a legacy as heels and baby faces in the company, reinventing themselves a couple of times too. And I love the Usos. And I wanted to put them on, and I almost did, but I bumped them. Like I said, I also bumped the Dudley Boys. Resume-wise, they're number 1. The titles they've won, ECW, WWE, WCW, TNA. Who knows? They could reunite and win the AEWs if they wanted to just for shits and gigs. They would probably be number 1. But when I really thought about it, as much as I like the Dudley Boys, love their matches, love Bubba and Devon to death, I think I love 10 other teams more than them. So unfortunately, I just didn't put them on the list. Another team noticeably absent from the list is the New Age Outlaws, another great team from that Attitude Era that, really kind of set the stage almost for Edge and Christian, those teams to take over. Because they were kind of champs first, with not a whole lot of challengers, but they were so entertaining. They got so over with DX and everything, and had some great matches and created a great legacy and run for themselves. But what Dudley's, Hardy's, and Edge and Christian would do after that to me was 10 times better. So I kind of left the Outlaws off the list as well. Los Guerreros. I loved Eddie and Chavo's teaming, but again, that was kind of a short run. They did have some run with the tag belts, and I know they feuded with Benjamin and Haas, and that was great, and they were great together. They were entertaining. The segments and the skits that they all did were wonderful, but in the end, I didn't include them. I didn't include Los Guerreros. Also didn't include Harlem Heat, because at the time when they were on top, they were scary to me. They were badass looking, much like the Road Warriors, but for some reason, they were heels, and I wanted them to lose a lot of times. So I can't really add them as my favorite, but definitely they should at least be mentioned because Booker and Stevie were fantastic. Strike Force, like I mentioned earlier, you can't get any better than Tito and Rick. Martel and Santana are two of the best wrestlers ever. They're put together in a team. They look alike. They dress alike. They have a good team name. They just have a good look to them. Not so sure about Girls and Cars. Hopefully, if they stayed together, they would have wound up dropping that song. But aside from their entrance theme, which was just horrific, they were a great team, and they looked good together, and I think they could have had a longer run. But they would go on to split them up after Martel's injury. They'd split up at WrestleMania 5. Martel would become the model, and that would be the end of that. But I think Strike Force could have had another run, maybe even another run with Demolition. Instead of giving Strike Force a match with the Brainbusters and splitting them up at WrestleMania 5, would have been cool if they got a rematch at WrestleMania 5 and won the belts back. I would have been into that, but that would have made it a babyface match. Very rare thing to do back then. I mentioned Rock and Roll Express and Midnight Express earlier on, very prominent, big NWA runs and big runs in the South, and both teams now, when I go back and watch a match, I'm just mesmerized about the work in the ring, how over everything is, everything they do gets a reaction from the fans, and how brutal and personal a lot of the feuds and the angles were with those teams. But again, this is Greg in his 40s appreciating these teams. Greg at 15 liked Demolition and some of these other teams a little bit better. So that's why I didn't include, Rock and Roll and Midnight Express and Tully and Arn and the Fabulous Freebirds. I wasn't even a very big fan of the Freebirds. I don't like that country redneck shit and stuff like that. Love Bam Bam Gordy and Michael Hayes and Roberts and everything. They're all great, but again, it wasn't what I was watching at the time. I saw Freebirds on TV plenty in the NWA and WCW and stuff like that, but and a little bit of their time in WWE, they're on some videotapes, from their cup of coffee there in like 84. But again, they didn't do enough to make them one of my favorites, but I definitely acknowledge they are one of the best for sure. And there was another team somebody mentioned. Oh, yeah, it was Owen and Davey. Owen and Davey would have to be definitely honorable mentions as well. I considered them for the list, and I almost had them on. I did have them on, but then I bumped them. Davey be on twice. And I was like, nah, Davey had a singles run too, so I didn't want to put him on there twice. So ultimately, I bumped Owen and Davey Boy Smith. But that leaves us with number one. Can you guys guess? Take a wild guess. Wild guess. Just shot in the dark. What do you think my number one is? Big surprise, the Hart Foundation. Bret Hart, Jim the Anvil Neidhart, my favorite tag team of all time. Bret's my favorite wrestler of all time. So the fact that he went through the tag team division and the Intercontinental, eventually won the world title, to me was the best thing ever. And I loved the Hart Foundation team. I loved them as heels. I've always admitted that even when they were heels, I liked them a lot as a kid. And I really was drawn to Bret for some reason. Loved his work in the ring, but it felt so much better when they turned babyface. Because when they turned babyface, I felt like I was allowed to like him, like I was able to come out of the closet almost. And that's when I really kind of latched onto the Harts, and I loved their look and presentation and everything. But when they came in, after the, Stu made the deal with Vince and stuff, and they brought Bret in as singles first, and he didn't really do a whole lot, and it took him a while, and then they paired him with Jim Neidhart. And it took them a while until they got with Jim. Well, no, I think they were with Jimmy right away. But they were wearing the blue at first, Then they had the idea to come up with the pink, and then call themselves the Hart Foundation. And they had just an interesting look. In the mid-'80s, it's not like it's 90s where hot pink was in. This is the mid-'80s. Two, professional wrestlers, two men wearing pink was a great way to get heat, and it worked. It's not a holy grail. I could buy it if I want to. I hesitate because sometimes I feel remorseful for spending money on something so silly, but one of the Coliseum videos that I'm missing is the Hart Foundation Coliseum video. Used to see it in the stores all the time, used to rent it, and I've seen it on eBay. Last time I checked it, wasn't even on there, but whenever it is on eBay, it's a bit pricey, and so I'm going to have to be drunk one night to buy it or something like that, but I really do want that for my collection. But I love that VHS tape because I have a download of it. I just don't have the physical copy. And, they had the Hart Foundation offices and Jim, that's when you could start seeing what a character he was and how funny he was. And I'll never forget the skit where they're like in the little office and they got these big pink boas on them and they're playing with the action figures and somebody busts them playing with the figures, playing with the dolls or whatever, shit like that. They were funny heels, and especially Jim. And Jim started, Bret took a while to kind of, grow, on the mic in his terms of a character and personality and charisma and stuff. Jim had it right off the bat, and the grabbing the beard and yeah, baby, and all that stuff. He was so fucking hilarious. And then when they became baby faces, it was even better. And they did the WrestleMania 4, talked about that show already. Last two in the ring, Bad News and Bret Hart, both are heels, and Bad News turns on him, tosses him over the top rope. That would wind up leading to a Hart Foundation babyface turn. They kicked Jimmy Hart out, and that was like the first time they split him up. And Bret and Anvil went on their own separate ways, and Bret Hart was Mr. Perfect a lot on the house show loop, but they were kind of getting beat all the time. They weren't ready to really break out as singles. So that went on for maybe a year, less than a year. They put them back together, and that's when they got back on the map again as a babyface team, and it would eventually go on to win the titles. Like I said, in my favorite tag team match of all time in history, SummerSlam 90 against Demolition. Just a great, great, great match. I say it 20 times a year, but if you guys haven't seen that match, please go watch the match. It's really good. And being able to win the titles as baby faces, and they look so good with them because by then they're wearing the jackets and they got the music, and Bret's got the glasses and Bret's getting better, and you can see what a seasoned, worker Bret is by this point, even more so than he was in like 87 and 88. He's starting to get a good look on him, and they had a great little tag team run there before WWE decided to split him up and send Bret on his own to win the Intercontinental title 1 year later after this match in 91 against Mr. Perfect. And then Bret was off doing a singles thing, and I latched right onto him, and I loved him. But, this run in 90 all the way up until WrestleMania 7 when they dropped the belts to the Nasties was amazing. It was so fun to watch. They were so good, and it was also cool to see a team have that gap because, again, they went a couple of years between title runs. They only held the belts twice, once as heels, once as baby faces. And I think both times, the runs were about equal length. I think they might have held the belts a little bit more when they were a heel, but I think the runs were equally as successful. The heel run, like we talked about earlier, they had great matches with the Rujo Brothers. They dropped the belts and then, had the reversal decision. The Killer Bees, great matches with them. The Bees actually beat them in a non-title match on TV, which I also watched live. And, of course, the match with the Young Stallions is one that sticks out, too, because the Stallions had beaten them on TV in a non-title, got a title match on Saturday Night's Main Event, my favorite Saturday Night's Main Event ever, Go back and watch it. It's early October 87. It's Honky Tonk Man Randy Savage, the Mega Powers get together for the first time. And there's 3 titles on the line. Hogan defends his belt against Roman Reigns' dad. And also Hart Foundation defend the titles against the Young Stallions. And that was just a great long show because Jimmy Hart got injured earlier on in the show. So, and the Hart Foundation got involved as well in that Honky and Savage match. Bret even cost Savage the match, which would lead to a one-on-one Saturday Night's Main Event match a couple months after that. But at the end of the card there, the Harts had to go out on their own without Jimmy and beat Young Stallions, beat those punks completely fucking clean, and retain their titles. They were just awesome heels. They were awesome baby faces. They were awesome all the way around. And of course, Neidhart just passed away a year or two ago, which was very sad. And the Hart Foundation went in the Hall of Fame in 2019, right? Well, which they deserve to be. But they are my favorite tag team of all time. It's impossible not to make them number one. There's no other name. I had to start just number one. I already knew who number 1, 2, and 3 was going to be: Bulldogs, Hearts, and Demolition. But from there, I had to kind of decide, which other teams were going to be on this list. But if you're just tuning in, and you're wondering who my top 10 are, we'll blow through these really quickly. Just to recap, number 10, we had the Hollywood Blondes. Number 9, we had the Steiner Brothers. Number 8, we had Edge and Christian. Number 7, we had the Road Warriors. Number 6 was New Day. Number 5, the Outsiders. Number 4, the Hardy Boys. Number 3, we had the British Bulldogs. Number 2, Demolition. And of course, number 1, the Hart Foundation. That is my top 10 favorite tag teams of all time. And trust me, I know when it comes to some of these teams, it's hard not to put the Dudleys or the Usos or the Outlaws or the Guerreros in there, or Brett and Dave, or Owen and Davey for that matter. I mean, it's really tough to leave them out, but at the end of the day, it's what I had to do. It's hard to make a top 10. Shit ain't easy, So anyway, there you go. There's my top 10 in a nutshell, which is perfect timing because I only had 90 minutes, or I'm sorry, I had 2 hours to get this done anyway, and we're coming right up on that. I'm going to hang out here, knock out some more of these super chats, and then I'm going to get out of here. And the next time you see me is on Monday night after Raw for a big, long Q&A stream. So make sure you're here. Be there or be stupid. Thank you for 5 more, Spaz. Who would be 2021's two-man power trip? Roman and Brock. Hands down. There's not even another option. That would be the two-man power trip. Roman, Brock, Heyman in the middle. Absolutely. The Von Erichs, I could have mentioned them. Holly Cousins, no, they wouldn't have been on. They wouldn't even been on my honorable mentions. I love Bob Holly. I love Crash, but again, I don't. And Doom, Funk Brothers, yeah, but again, the Funks. I guess they won in the NWA, so I guess they would have counted. Yeah, Powers of Pain. I liked their and again, when it comes to underrated theme songs, I mean, for like 1988, they're running WWF. They had a pretty good theme song. They brought in Baron von Raschke to be their manager for a short time as well, which is kind of cool. But again, not on my list. Just didn't make the cut. You know what, Maka? If I was going to do an underrated tag teams list, the Luger and Davey alliance would be on the Allied Powers. Lex Luger and Davey Boy Smith. Davey could have been on this list 3 fucking times, man. But I thought that was an underrated team. I thought they looked good together. I liked their theme music. I thought it was a good use of both of them since Luger was kind of out of the title picture. Bulldog didn't have a whole lot going on. You had some weak teams. You put these two together, 2 big badass guys with a huge singles legacy. Could have easily been tag team champions. I'm surprised they weren't. Still kind of makes me mad that they never were. Oh, of course, Mean Street Posse. Mean Street Posse and Bella Twins. Man, Roderick, you know what's funny, Roderick, is Strike Force was on the list. I think I had him at number 9, and I was like, nah, I can't. I can't put Strike Force ahead of Steiners. I just can't. So I decided against it as much as I wanted to, but I wanted that bad. Neil Barrett, my cousin Vinny. Yeah, you heard that. I watched the Karate Kid Part 2 earlier today. You've never seen it, or are you just watching it for fun? It was good. I'm ready for Okinawa because he goes back and runs into Chosen. They fight 4 times on Cobra Kai in the early part of season 3. So I'm really excited. And it's very heartwarming that Chosen bettered his life after Daniel honked his nose and let him live, and winds up helping Daniel out a lot as they became adults, and helps train him. I think just appreciate him for sparing his life. And I'm sorry I was a jackass. And let's work on getting you informed to go back to the States and whoop some ass. So I'm really excited to see how Chosen plays into Cobra Kai. But yeah, it's good. I mean, I like the ending though. You know, the crane kick is kind of funny in part 1, but I love that the way you win part 2 is just to bitch slap a motherfucker 5 times. But it's, you know, it's that drum technique stuff. But it was good. The music is so good in those movies. It's so good. That ending fight music that's playing during the final fight is remarkable. The movie's so good. AJ Daniels, thanks for the $5, dude. I can't remember who said it, but Demolition were WWF's answer to the Road Warriors. Demolition was just better workers, which I agree. Yeah, we kind of already talked about that. We talked about that very thing. You could definitely make an argument that they were as good or better in the ring than the Road Warriors. I think they were, because Road Warriors earlier in the career were real stiff and shit, but Hawk would get good. Hawk would, like I said, he kind of reminded me he had the same type of smoothness that an Orton or Savage has, but that didn't come until like later on. You know, he's early in 1984, 1985. He was just a bear in there, just beating the shit out of you with no technique whatsoever, where Darso and Edie were much better seasoned, much better in the ring, and overall, I think understood stuff better. And that's why I think Demolition got over on their own without that. They were able to overcome the Road Warrior comparison, and that's a big deal. Hey, Jay, thanks for 5 more, dude. I like Hart Foundation with just Brett and Jim than the 97 Hart Foundation. Well, yeah, I like the 97 Hart Foundation as a faction, for sure. You know, they're kind of different. The 87 version, just a tag team. 97 was a faction. I kind of view those as 2 separate things, even though they shared the same name. I didn't really view 97 as a tag team, more of a faction, but I like the 97 version. I don't know if I liked it better or whatever, but I definitely liked it just as much. I love that Hart Foundation faction. Wish it would have lasted longer. I wish Pillman would have lived through it too. Tigerzilla Gamer, excuse me. Thank you for the $5. Appreciate that. Didn't Brett and Jim have blue gear for a while? Yeah, they did. Also, I'm mad that Doink and Dink aren't number 1. I'm sorry about that. I thought about putting Doink and Dink up there. I just couldn't do it. Yeah, Brett, they wore blue. I think they even wore yellow for a short time. Like a black and like a yellow streak on the side. They were wearing blue in the WrestleMania 2 Battle Royal. Brett was the last one in there. Or they both were with Andre. Andre tossed Jim over and then picked Brett up and lawn darted him out of the ring right onto Jim. But yeah, they were wearing blue in that. And they wore blue for a while until they said, hey, we should wear pink. I'm glad they did. Pink looked good on them. Thanks for 5 more, Spaz. How about mixed tag team titles? Have a tournament of mixed tag teams. Have the finals at Mania, and a TLC match. TLC mixed tag match. That would be really hard to book. They could. So far, they've only done the mixed match challenge on Facebook, so they got a long way to go to create championships. But do we need more championships? I don't know. Most people say no. Doesn't New Day having 3 members make them a faction? Kinda. It's a gray area there, Barry. I mean, Freebirds were considered a tag team and a faction, just like New Day was, and technically Demolition, was a 3-man team for a while there too. So. I thought about that when I put New Day on there, but they've won 11 tag team titles, so you got to consider them a tag team. And plus, I think a 3-man team should have a presence here, because the Freebird rule was created and New Day took it and ran with it and turned it into a whole new deal. So, yeah, I guess technically they are, but I'm counting them as a tag team. It's Greg's rules up in here. Hey, Ben. Yeah, America's Most Wanted and Beer Money were both good. They wouldn't make my top 10, though. And also, this is only WWE and WCW, not TNA. So if we included everybody, then maybe some more teams can get a shot here. But I would have to do a top 20 then. And even if I did, Ben, I'm not sure if either of those teams would make it. I liked them, but I didn't watch a whole lot of TNA. So I have nothing against those teams, but I wouldn't consider them neither one in my top 20, to be honest with you. But anyway, I've got to get out of here. I've actually got to head to work. So I got to go into work for a couple hours tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and bail. I want to thank you guys for hanging out. We had a decent audience considering this is kind of a wacky video. So if you don't mind, smash that thumbs up button on your way out the door. I would really appreciate that. And I hope you guys have a good rest of your night and weekend. And I hope you have I hope you have had a great holiday season and a few days off. And then, of course, we got New Year's coming up and brand new year 2021. So don't forget, please mark your calendar. I'll have a link up probably tomorrow, Monday night, immediately following Raw, big Monday Night Raw review, followed by our big year-end Q&A. Last chance to send in questions for that at goodmikework@gmail.com. And I might answer it there. Otherwise, just hang out with us in the chat. Ask them there. I'll hang out all night and we'll answer some questions, chat some wrestling, and I'll throw back a few cold ones, and we'll have our final video of 2020. And then don't worry, never fail, because I'll be right back up here at the very beginning of 2021, because we have a Winged Eagle 1 week from today. And then after that, we've got Wrestle Kingdom and WWE's big Legend show, all happening in a 2-day span there. The Legend show, I believe, comes in between Wrestle Kingdoms. There'll be a whole bunch of shit to talk about next week. It will be fun. So even though it's my last video of the year, you'll see me just a few days later. And then I've got some Royal Rumble, classic Royal Rumbles reviews set for January. So it's going to be a hoot. You guys take care. Have a great